here with faction-focused Seraphon. I'm excited to finally talk about the Space Lizards because it is an army that it's got its book. Boys, it got its book in very, very, very early on, yet it hasn't probably seen the glory and the time that it deserves. So I've got two gentlemen here, masters in their craft. They're going to talk all things Seraphon. First, over the ditch, our resident Kiwi, which we've just realized today doesn't actually have a Kiwi accent. It is Ben Rose. How are you, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, Pom through and through.
Really surprised. I haven't personally met Ben. I'm like, oh, can't wait for New Zealand to be on here. But explains that the Kiwis learnt their Warhammer by stealing the English.
I know a lot of people that probably wouldn't be too happy with that.
They're not on the stream, so we don't have to worry about it. But for the folks who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick introduction? How long have you been playing for? What drew you to the Space Lizards?
Yeah, I'm Ben Rose. I've approximately been in the hobby for 20 years, mainly painting. Played back before the end times, Ogres and Seraphon. Seraphon was probably my first army. I mean, dinosaurs, what else draws you towards it? So, but yeah, coming over to New Zealand, played quite a lot and got taught more or less the new rules. And yeah, they're definitely fun to play. And there's a lot, they're very dynamic. So, yeah.
Well, it's great to have you. And I've seen that you've been kicking butt, taking names all in the name of the Slan. So it's good to hear your expertise. And following from a very strong gaming culture from the Measured Gaming crew, we have Tyson Gleeson from Australia. How are you, Tyson?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. I don't have quite the illustrious career that Ben does. I've been playing AOS, really. I never played Warhammer before that, not in a serious way. I kicked around with a couple of Wood Elf models here and there, but nothing. I don't think I ever really played a game of Fantasy Battles. So I'm an AOS boy through and through. And before that, for a very, very brief sojourn, I played a little bit of 40k.
No, it's great to have you. And I'm just going to show you my pedigree. So I'm not a Seraphon player, but on my shirt, I do.
Yes.
I've got a OG skink shirt. So so I love Seraphon. I love the Lizard Man. I did joke about the Space Lizard thing, but it is an army that's dear to my heart. I absolutely love them, and I want to see more of them on the table, which is part of the reason why I have you two fine gentlemen here, hopefully to share the tips, tricks, tactics on getting the most out of your Seraphon. Whether you remember them onto the battlefield, whether you ignore that story and they're from the lizard, the jungles. I love this army. So let's talk, Ben. What are the Seraphon? What is the backstory on these guys from a narrative perspective? What do we know about the Seraphon?
Well, yeah, no, it's going from old. It's completely different. That's the play style I normally run with. It's more of a skink perspective, but it's more of the hunting packs. It's more of just having to wade through all the skinks to get to the vital stuff. But from a narrative perspective, yeah, kind of remembered into reality basically, and by the fluff that they do eventually end up sticking around, that they actually start becoming real and go off on their own, and So, but from a perspective, yeah. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the new fluff. I think there's a lot of places I could go with it. It just seems to remind me a lot more of the Legion of the Damned kind of fluff, where they just turn up when they're needed the most.
Because you've got, because you've got the old story. So from the world of the Warhammer Fantasy days, you had the Slan, which were potentially one of the first inhabitants of the world of Warhammer. And they had a lot of involvement in trying to beat down chaos as chaos kind of spread through the old world. And I think they taught the High Elves, or what will soon hopefully be the Light Elves from Tickless and Terrian. Completely butchered that one up. But they taught the magic, and in the death of the old world, their souls have I guess, gone into space and the Slann remembers them into the battlefield. So there's definitely this open space of narrative, and whether you follow the old lizardman jungle kind of aesthetic or this more space demon kind of celestial ethereal type existence, they've got a really interesting play style and also a very interesting history you can make up, and a very interesting, I guess, relationship with the Stormcast.
Yeah.
Tyson, what
I love the fluff. I love the idea that you can have this omnipotent being who just summons in whatever he needs, and he thinks it, and therefore it is. I really, really enjoy that narrative, and I as I said when we were chatting before the stream, I never even knew what Lustria was because it had nothing to do with the world that was. So this entirely new narrative for me as a player who's only picked up the army in the last sort of 12 or 18 months, I really agree 100%. I think they've got unlimited space to grow that narrative, and certainly when they redo Seraphon for AOS 2.0, I can certainly see the Slann becoming these omnipotent beings that they should be, and that the fluff sort of says that they are. And I would really love it if they push that narrative into these celestial demons that are formed out of starlight. Like, I just think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity with this army, and I imagine there will be a time, hopefully not too far away, that we do get an updated version of this book, and we kind of flesh out the mortal realms now that the cities of Sigmar comes about, now that things are really kind of being concrete in the mortal realms. But regardless of an old battle tome, it's still a usable battle tome and a good battle tome.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So what attracted you both to Seraphon / I mean, Tyson, I'll go to you. I mean, you don't have that legacy of Warhammer Fantasy. What brought you to them in AOS over every other AOS faction?
The sad reality is I wanted an army that was going to easily transition from 40k to AOS. Didn't want to have to really adjust my playstyle all that much. So gunline armies are a real thing in 40k, unfortunately. So that's the style that I play the Seraphon in. And that was what drew me to them, was tons of rerolls, tons of dice, really good centerpieces like Battalions and the Engines of the Gods, and those big models that do stuff. And the fact that the summoning was also another really big point, and the list that I run at the moment sort of doubles down on both of those things. So yeah, that's the main reason why I got into them, is I wanted that gunline army, and it was really well placed in a combat heavy meta, which is AOS.
And Ben, obviously you've got a pedigree from fantasy, but why did you rebase your squares to rounds and continue with the Seraphon in the new book?
I saw how mobile they could be more than anything, and how forgiving they could be. I mean, yeah, they work on a structure where every model kind of gives an aura or gives a buff, and they can stack up. But it's just that kind of, there's a lot more to deal with than you think at first. When you first see them on paper, you're like, oh, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that. But then when you actually get playing with them, there's just so much that could be possible from list building. There's just so much that you can do with them, not just dedicate yourself to Ripperdactyls, or you can have a mix of everything to kind of really kind of give you a different outlook on the game, and change your play style up pretty quickly. So that's why I've kind of really gone for them. And plus, who doesn't like dinosaurs?
That's it. You've got the dinosaur aesthetic, but also, and I've been watching some local players building up a Seraphon army for the tournament that I'm running in 2 weeks' time. And things like the contrast paint goes really well with Seraphon, and the ability to use all these bright and beautiful colors. Back in the day when Skinks are, these really bright greens and blues, like these beautiful colors. You can do some crazy patterns, but then you've got the space kind of ethereal look as well, where you could go a very Night Haunt kind of remembering into existence. I think the hobby opportunity is incredible in this particular army. I think that's what kind of draws me to it. And again, as you guys said, who doesn't like big dinosaurs? I love those big dinosaurs.
Lizards riding lizards is just awesome. It's really good.
And then summoning more lizards.
Yeah.
Cool. So Ben, what do you get for being, I guess, Allegiance Seraphon? So obviously there is such a big. Actually, you know what? Before we get to that, let's talk about the strengths. What are the strengths of Seraphon? So I've talked about the hobby.
Yeah, no, maneuverability for sure. The summoning definitely plays a part now. When they first came out, I mean, you relied very heavily on your Engine of the Gods to kind of get your free summons. But yeah, I think the summoning, just to kind of fill them voids that are maybe get taken out early on, it's very good to kind of recycle your dead pile and pretty infuriating to your opponent. But yeah, I think the strength is very much re-rolls seems to be the biggest one. I mean, you just put an Astrolith Bearer there, re-rolling all hits within 12. It's pretty game-changing in certain instances. So, and depending on what kind of battalion you take, you could be re-rolling everything: your wounds, hits, saves. Yeah. So I think I'd say that's one of their biggest ones, and their teleport, being able to do it twice, very much for objective catching, is brilliant.
Yeah, they've got a lot of high movement shenanigans, which I'm sure we'll talk a bit later with the tactics. But even their base troops have some quite high movement.
Yeah, all 8, I think, except for the Slan, who's really slow, and the Battalion. Yeah.
Tyson, anything else from yourself?
I think Ben's hit the nail on the head. They're very forgiving. If most armies, you take out their buff pieces, and that's really hampers their ability to recover. With Seraphon, you take out an Astrolith Bearer, and I sacrifice 3-4 spells, and he comes back. That ability to replenish your losses and to get those really important buff pieces back on the table and doing what you need them to do. You can blank an entire turn from an opponent who's had to put effort into killing them, and then you just bring them back. Engines of the Gods at 18 summoning points are just an absolute steal. Absolute steal.
And that summoning allows you to adapt to your opponent, where things like Legions of Nagash lets you just bring back more models from the same army. The Seraphon goes, right, well, I need a hero. I need lots of troops. I need something big and bestial. I can summon depending on the situation, the scenario, or the opponent, which that flexibility is massive.
Huge. Absolutely huge. And the fact that the summoning, you can have a Skink Priest off to the side, summon in some cogs, have the Slan turn the cogs to get an extra spell and turn that into more conjuration. It just adds that tactical flexibility once you get that summoning pool up around that sort of 18-20 mark. And for 24 points, which over 2 turns you'll easily accumulate, you bring in Battalions on. And it's just insane.
Yeah. So some of the other strengths that I want to call out is certainly the rend and the ability to ignore rend on a lot of your troops. As an opponent that mostly has rend 1 with my free people, it grinds my gears that I get in and I try to hit that Battalion or with its lasers or snakes, and it's like, ignore rend, and I just cry a little bit.
I think the ignore rend of 1 on the Skinks is probably the thing that has annoyed most of my opponents over the course of my journey, is the fact that they have a 6-up save only, but you can't push that off with only rend 1. So they're always getting some sort of a save. And, I still think that even with the points increases from GHB 2019, that Skinks is still the best unit in, order, in the order faction. They are just so good. They're
so cheap. They're super cheap.
But it's the ability to dance out of combat, and they put your opponent to a decision that they don't want to make, in that we attacked my 70-point battle line unit, or I dance out of combat and you can't cap an objective over me, and that sort of stuff. The amount of times that's been clutch, they're just nuts. They're just so good.
And for any new player that's listening to this, the dance out of combat is a reference to you can charge or be in combat, and as your action, instead of striking, you can retreat from combat. So that forces your opponent to either attack the Skinks first and potentially not wound that character or that monster, or if they ignore the skinks, they can then run out of combat. And what's happened to me time and time again with someone like Chris Tott, who's a wonderful Seraphon player locally, is he'll retreat his skinks onto or around or start to challenge an objective, which is crazy when you think about this big block of skinks.
Yeah. Sit them directly on an objective, you charge up to them, and then they've got an 8-inch move out of combat. So you dance 3 away from your opponent, and you're still within 6 inches of the objective with a block of 20 skinks. It's easily one of the best things about the army is the skink play.
Yeah, yeah, and it's got such a diverse range as well. So Ben, what's the weaknesses that you found? Like, what are the things that you are most worried about, or maybe you're going to think about bridging with allies?
I think the weakness is they can't cope with mortal wound output. I don't think a lot of armies can, unless they're ethereal or they've got feel no pain more or less, or discussing resilience, or many of the other things. That they don't deal very well with mortal wounds. And one of their big things was dealing with hordes, but as of General's Handbook 2019, we've actually got some really wicked spells that kind of cast on an 8, but very good at killing hordes. But yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses. And I feel the Slan should definitely maybe do a little bit more than he does, but maybe that will come in later dates. I mean, he's already dispelling the board, so that's pretty strong nowadays.
There's probably a strength that we didn't talk about, was the ability of the Slan to actually unbind table-wide abilities, which is massive.
Oh, for sure.
And as of GHB 2019, to be able to unbind endless spells at an unlimited range as well, I think is a really big thing that the Slan now has. I do agree with Ben. I think the Slan, they're very, very good, but without an inherent bonus to cast, sure, you've got a couple of ways to get some bonuses, but without them having their own inherent bonus to cast, you're relying on other things, and I think that is a real weakness with the Slan, especially with some of the high casting values on some of the spell lore spells, which are incredible. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, that's probably the big thing that I'm waiting to see is what they do to make that Slan just that little bit more. You're going to always take one, and you don't want them to be a tax, and that sometimes they feel like it. But yeah, definitely the biggest weakness of the army by far is mortal wounds. You've got no real way to deal with an army with a high mortal wound output, and so that's easily the way to beat them, is just stack mortal wounds.
Yeah, that's fair. Look, and I think it's an interesting one as well, where there's no silver bullet in regards to the best build. And I think there's a bit of work to be done around creating synergies, and there's ways to buff the skinks, ways to buff your Kroxigor. There's ways to start summoning, and there's a lot of things you want to do, but it's hard to do it all really well. Which is why I think currently you see a lot of investment happening in summoning. People are really pulling in and trying to get the most out of summoning, but equally that then puts you at a disadvantage elsewhere. So we'll talk list building, we'll talk about some things to consider, but probably much like a lot of armies, it's hard to do everything you want to do, and you've got to make sacrifices. Cool. So we've talked about strengths and weaknesses. I guess I want to know, Tyson, what do I get by going Allegiance Seraphon as opposed to maybe like a mixed order?
Lords of Space and Time is the big thing that you get. And as of 2019 GHB, the fact that there's no longer a roll involved, I actually think is easily the best change. So prior to GHB, you would roll a dice for a unit. On a 1 to 2, nothing happened. On a 3 to 4, you can pick that unit up, put them anywhere on the board more than 9 inches away from an enemy. And on a 5-6, you can pick them up, put them anywhere on the board more than 9 inches away, and then move them in the movement phase. So there was a little bit of interplay there with some dice rolls. For me personally, the amount of 1s and 2s I rolled on that move was statistically insane. And not being able to do that movement and not being able to pick that unit up and have them where I need them to be was a massive, massive detraction from my strategy and cost me has cost me a lot of games. So the fact that as of 2019, we pick them up, we move them, and it just happens, I think that's massive. I think that it's easily one of the best movement abilities in the game. And so that's probably the big thing that we get from being Allegiant Seraphon. Lords of Space and Time is huge. We also get access to our summoning. So all of our summoning keys off a Slann. So the Slann is a 3-cast wizard who can sacrifice his spells to gain Celestial Conjuration points. And then we can invest those Celestial Conjuration points in summoning in units from a table, which basically includes everything that isn't a named character. So we have got some pretty incredible summoning options. The one thing that I would potentially like to see is at the moment for 6 conjuration points, for example, we can summon in 10 skinks. We don't have an option to summon in a unit of 20 or a unit of 30 by sacrificing more points. So that's something that I'd like to see come into the future, is those bigger unit sizes for more points, obviously. So, but yeah, so that's what we gain.
So you get a whole lot of movement shenanigans, and then you also, and by the way, that is a very powerful allegiance ability. The amount of times that has come into play and either stolen a game from me or really messed up one of my plans. This game is really won and lost on movement. So the fact that you're able to move around units is critical. And then the summoning is just awesome. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's fair to assume, as an old book, you don't get a terrain piece.
No terrain piece, no endless spells.
No endless spells. Again, this could be changed in the future. And just what Tyson said as well, those rules, those allegiance rules, are found in the General's Handbook as opposed to the Battle Tome, correct?
Yeah, the best way to think of the Seraphon Battle Tome is a War Scroll collection at this point. It doesn't have allegiance abilities. It doesn't have our spell lore. It's really a War Scroll collection at this point, and desperately needs that AOS 2.0 update.
Yeah. I'm just calling it out just in case someone who goes out to Games Workshop picks up this book because they're inspired by this video, and then like, where are those? What's that Lord and Space and Time stuff that they were talking about? But that is fitting in currently the General's Handbook as opposed to your rule book.
Yeah.
Cool. And is there any ways to, I guess, is there any sub-allegiances? So I know that Stormcast have their chambers. Daughters of Cain have their temples. Are there any sub-allegiances or chambers that happen in Seraphon, or is it just flat out?
It's just just Allegiant Seraphon. No chambers, no, what I'd personally like to see moving forward is allegiance to a particular Slann. So there are definitely some named Slann throughout the lore. And in a couple of the battalions, there's a couple of named Slann. I'd like to see, that your allegiance is to that particular Slann, and that gives you something for being that. But yeah, no, that's definitely on the wish list as well.
I'll let GW know next time when I send my Christmas card. Cool. All right. I think we've got an interesting, well-rounded introduction to Seraphon. Do we want to start building a list and start talking about maybe some of those hero choices in those units and why we go about creating them? And again, just a bit of a caveat. This is obviously about a gaming kind of point of view. So this is clearly a hobby. So do what you want to do. If you love a particular unit and you want to build something, do it. But if you're looking to go really well at a tournament and get the most out of your list, we're going to talk a bit more critically for these units. But again, it's your hobby. You do what you want to do. So when you guys start building your list, do you guys start with a hero choice, a battalion? What's the first thing that comes to mind for you when you're building lists? And what's the tip that you'd give for the person who's starting?
Well, your auto include Slan, your battle line. Just normally look at them first, try and get them points kind of out there. But I've tended to go towards getting all of those expensive units on the board first off. So you don't have to actually summon as much. So rather than spending 24 points on a Battalion, there's already 2 of them on the board. So you have a little bit more to play with. You can, get something that you actually might need. So if I've found going for them units that cost a little bit more later on are nice to just already have on the table. But it might be different with other people. It's just, but Skinks are auto include Slan and Astrolith for sure. And it just kind of differs nowadays with the endless spells, because I've been rocking the Purple Sun, and it's for 50 points. It is phenomenal.
All right, let's not ruin Christmas yet. Let's not.
I know. Yeah, sorry.
We'll talk endless spells, but from what I'm hearing from your Astrolith Bearer and your Slan, the hero choice is a good place to start, because that's kind of going to start dictating what type of list you're going to do. Is it a summoning list? Is it going to be a skink list? Is it going to be a bit of everything? So Tyson, let's kick us off and let's talk hero. What's a good hero choice that you would potentially start with, and why?
So I have to agree with Ben. I think that your auto include is always a Slan. But I think then the list building choice becomes, how do you want to utilize that Slan? Do you want to exclusively focus on a summoning pool? And do you want to utilize that Slan to increase that summoning pool and to double down on your summoning? So then you'd make a lot of list choices based on how you want to utilize it. If you want him to actually cast spells rather than just sacrifice them to get conjuration points, then you'd build your list in a very different way. I definitely agree that an Astrolith Bearer should always be an auto include. And the way that you can utilize him is massive. So I definitely would always start with a Slan and decide what I want to do with him, and then have an Astrolith Bearer just because they're that good.
All right, so let's start with a Slan. So why would you have a Slan? Is it your general, and why? What's the key to taking a Slan?
So in terms of your Celestial Conjuration, so that's our summoning, everything keys off the Slan. So the Slan must be your general in order to be able to sacrifice spells to gain conjuration points in the first place. And then you summon within a distance of the Slan or the Astrolith Bearer. So I don't think that if you want to have that interplay and you want to have that summoning pool and you want to have that utility of being able to summon, then you have to include a Slan. And he has to be a general. So it does limit some of your list building choices in that regard. But I just... The utility that it brings is just so phenomenal. And the fact that in terms of allegiance, in terms of general traits as well, the Slan can take Great Rememberer, which is allegiance which is a general trait that lets you do Lords of Space and Time twice. Wow. So you get your free movement twice instead of just once, which is huge. Like the tactical flexibility that even one of those moves bring, let alone being able to do it twice, is just phenomenal.
Ben's furiously nodding his head. He's like, "Yeah. I agree 100%."
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Sure.
No. Is there any situations where a Slan isn't a good choice to be a general, or isn't an auto include? Ben,
if you wanted to run a really fluffy Saurus narrative list, then an Old Blood on Carnosaur or something like that wouldn't be a terrible choice. But for me personally, I just looking at it from a purely perspective, a competitive perspective, which is where I come from primarily, I just don't think that any of the other hero choices for a general or you just can't go around it. You need that Slan. And now that the spell lore has been expanded in GHB 2019, and one of the other abilities that the Slan has is the ability to swap spells. So each turn, for no roll, just because he can say, I don't want to know that spell anymore, I want to grab this one. So I don't want to be able to give a unit fly. I want to be able to wipe out this 60 units of grot that's gotten in my face. So I'll swap spells and we'll do that. I just think that tactical flexibility of being able to change spells on the fly the Slan is just too good.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah, huge, absolutely huge.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that plays into how forgiving Seraphon are, just having that extra, well, this spell's not really going to suit this situation, so at the end of the hero phase, I'm going to change it round and we'll do this for next time. So you're always thinking that turn ahead, but it's still, yeah, it's a brilliant thing to have.
Ben, you also talked about the Aslith Bearer as a key hero choice. Why the Bearer?
Well, he's just got so much to bring to the table. I mean, he's given +1 to casting, plus to your range, which is just brilliant. He's gathering the conjuration points, but he's also got a 12-inch bubble that allows everything to re-roll failed hits, which is pretty good. I mean, if you place and position him right and your army is close enough in, that's a lot of units re-rolling all the failed hits. So
he's actually even better than that because he doesn't re-roll failed hits. He re-rolls all hits. So negatives to hit don't apply because he can, it's actually even better because and it's a subtle difference in wording, but it's tripped a lot of opponents up of mine anyway. Because there's a big difference between re-rolling failed hits and re-rolling all hits. And that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the way modifiers are nowadays as well. Yeah, that's good to clarify.
The amount of negative hit modifiers that are out there in the current AOS competitive scene anyway, that he just completely negates is just insane.
Because we know rerolls happen before modifiers, so that is a huge change. To be able to just re-roll fails. What other choices? I'll go Ben. Ben, I kind of stole your thunder and forced you to talk about the Aslith Bearer. What other hero choices come to mind that add value to your list, or what's a good choice?
I would say engines are still very viable. They've had a little bit of a points increase, but being next to a Slan especially just kind of gives you a little bit more control over what you actually want to do with them. So you could be throwing out a D6 mortal wound with 25-inch range, which is with no line of sight. You don't have to see what you're shooting at, which is pretty cool. But also summoning, and for what everyone chases, rolling them 3 6s, you get to double all your attacks and movement for a turn, which I've got it a few times, and when it happens, it's normally a handshake by that point. So, yeah.
I have never got the trip 6s, which really saddens me. But I couldn't agree more. The Engine of the Gods is a standout, even with it went up 20 points, still completely viable at 240 points.
Yeah, and just to give that ability to heal as well, so it's very going back into that niche kind of situational. So if you need to heal some units, the option's there, and the Slan kind of gives you that ability because you're rolling an extra dice and you pick the 3 that you want to use, so it kind of you have a little bit more control over it. So yeah, I'd say it's maybe not a must include, but it's definitely something you want to get on the board through summoning means, or you can start off so you can start churning them Skinks or Ripperdactyls turn 1, which is always good to have, placing that block toad down. So yeah.
What do we think of I've certainly started seeing a renaissance of the Carnosaur and bringing back either the Old Blood or the Scarvet. What do we think of the big dinosaur, our big T-Rex kind of looking? Is it a good choice, or do we like it, Tyson?
I don't rate them at all. In terms of, I have a couple.
It's an awesome model. Which is why I want to call it out.
Yeah, they are an amazing model, and I thoroughly enjoyed building it and painting it. And I'm not really into hobby. I must admit, I'm really into the gaming side of things. But putting him together and putting paint on him, I thoroughly enjoyed. Unfortunately, I don't think he's ever seen any tabletop time.
Why is that?
The Saurus half of the book, in my humble opinion, the Saurus half of the book just isn't great. He doesn't do what I want him to do, and he just doesn't have that combat prowess that I would be wanting to take him for. I think that it's not that he's bad, there's just better choices, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah,
Ben?
no, I agree. I'm very skink focused at the moment. I think Saurus lack quite a lot at the moment. They're not terrible. They're still ignoring -1, but I feel they need some work. But they kind of force you into the battalion picking especially for the 80-point ones, that you have to take a Saurus battalion, enable for you to take Shadow Strike or Thunderquake or whatever you want. Which I feel maybe in the future they'll do just a skink big battalion. I'm hoping, but it seems very unlikely. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with them when we eventually get a book.
Yeah, I think that the points reduction for Warriors was very nice, and it did definitely make me think about potentially painting up some of the ones that I've got sat there, and look at what the interplay with Skinks are. But when you sat down to actually think about it and be critical, Skinks are just better. At roughly the same points, they do so much more for the army. They've got a ranged attack, ignore rend of 1, and they just do what I want them to do. Whereas the Warriors, unfortunately, just don't.
So that's probably a really good call out here, is that when you're choosing your heroes, I'm sure this is relevant to most, if not all, armies. But I think the synergies in thinking about, am I going down a skink route? Am I going down a Saurus route? And thinking about what's going to buff those pieces are going to be critical. Probably more so in this particular build more than other armies, where you have some key decisions to make in battle line. So do keep that in mind. And obviously we're rubbishing, or we're not saying that the Saurus are as good as the Skinks. But if you are going down that Saurus route for whatever reason, maybe you found something, or you like that more elite kind of style, then what we're saying about the Carnosaur with the old what's it called, the Scarvet, that may be a little bit different for you. But I think by the sounds of it, Tyson and Ben are talking about very skink heavy builds, and is that a fair assumption, guys?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We've got a local player who plays Firelance, and I think that one of the things that Ben hinted on with the Saurus is you've got to really think about your battalion choices, because the Saurus are going to gain whatever power they can, more so from your battalion choices than from their war scrolls. So I think about, if you want to go down the Saurus road, because they are cool ass models, and it really pains me that I can't put them on I don't put them on the table as much as I probably should, because I really like that aesthetic of Saurus on cold ones. Dinosaurs riding dinosaurs was a big draw, but I think that you need to look at your battalions and work out what you're going to gain from your battalion choices, and that's what's going to make them that little bit more viable.
Yeah, great call. Great call. So think about your hero choices. Obviously, we're starting to think about the battle line. Think about the battalions. I very rarely see a Seraphon army these days being run outside of a battalion. But if we're just starting off, we're thinking about the Slan, we're thinking about the Ashlith Bearer. The Carnosaur is cool as hell, but maybe not the strongest. It does some good damage, but is it the most reliable, or is it the thing that you want to buy first? Maybe, maybe not. Up to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. I wouldn't start with a Seraphon start collecting box. I'd start with a few boxes of Skinks. If you wanted to pick up the army, get yourself a Slan, get yourself some boxes of Skinks, and start that way. And then you get to include your big cool monsters.
Very cool. Ben, we've talked a lot about Skinks, so I want to talk about some Skink heroes. We've got the Priest, you've got the Star Priest, you've got the Star Seer. Do we like any of those? Are they good buff pieces if we're going to go down a Skink route?
I feel the Skink Priest is really underrated, but he's an auto include for a lot of my lists. I mean, why, especially depending how you want to play him, he's got a prayer that's allowing you to re-roll your saves, runs, and charges. He's actually amazing. So it's within 8-inch range, and yeah, no, I think not many people, they always seem to go down the Star Priest route, which I understand because he gets a spell and the Priest doesn't. But there's room for both of them to synergize well with each other and definitely help your army out of a tight spot. I mean, it's on a 4+ for his prayer, but if it goes off, it's just amazing to have if you don't have a battalion that's allowing you to re-roll them saves. And for 80 points, he's amazing. The Star Priest, equally as good in his own right, definitely giving that +1 to hit or -1 to hit. And if it's a demon unit, they suffer wounds. And also anything with jaw attacks, I believe, and bites. On a roll of a 6, they do double damage, a wound roll of a 6, which is pretty good, just to kind of throw that on there. No cost to it.
Was he the hero that also gives you the reroll dice?
No, that was the Starseer, I believe, gives the reroll. I think he used to be slightly better. But yeah, he gives and there's a spell. His spell is the Curse of Fate, and he allows you to increase a dice roll or decrease a dice roll once per phase, which could be very good, especially for against demons where they roll a 1 and you increase it to 2 just to kind of pour salt in the wounds. So yeah, but no, the Starseer, I don't see many people using him as much. He's pretty cheap, but he just doesn't seem to. There used to be a battalion that he was in, but now I think that's been removed. Heaven's Watch. So yeah, he just doesn't seem to be used as often, and I don't think we have an option to summon him, do we?
No, I don't think so.
But his spell, some people go down the Slan route and take the Vast Intellect, where you can kind of hone into them spells, which is pretty good from the Star Priest and from the Skink Starseer, which really helps in certain situations.
I would very much use a Starseer in a Saurus heavy list, which is probably why you don't see him as much, because his big thing is at the start of your turn, he's a command point farm. So you roll a dice on a 2+, get a command point. And for things like the Carnosaur, which gives extra attacks with its command ability and that sort of stuff, if I was going to go down the Saurus road, I would definitely pop one of them in, because being able to manipulate dice rolls, so you're exploding 6s to be able to pop a 5 to a 6 to get an exploding shot, pretty big. Get your extra command points so you can spam that more often. I definitely think that the Starseer has a place in a list like that, because of the fact that it's unlimited. So it's once per phase, and it goes off on a 4. So his spell's very reliable, and it will have an impact in every phase of a Saurus-based list. So that's probably the best place that I'd see him. When I'm running Shadow Strike, definitely pop in. I mean, it's the tax for the battalion is the 80-point Skink Priest, and I rate them. Their -1 to hit spell at 18 inches is very nice, and it means that if somebody's closing in on you, just that -1 to hit is quite nice, and it pairs really well with spells like Geminids and that sort of stuff. -1 to hit from him, -1 to hit from the Geminids. Your big scary monster or your block of 30 witch elves is now hitting on 6s rather than hitting on 4s. So it just means that you've got that little bit of flexibility.
Yeah.
And for 80 points, he's an extra spell cast. Like that's top notch in my opinion.
Very cheap. Yeah, 100%. What about our other Carnosaur models? So we've got the Sunblood, we've got the Eternity Warden. You've even got the Old Blood, whether it's on foot or on Cold One. Now we know that we have, our Saurus units aren't as good as the Skinks. But do you see viability? Do you see things? I've seen a few Sunbloods and even Eternity Wards pop up here and there. Ben, do you have any thoughts on the Saurus heroes?
Oh yeah, no, I think for buffing and especially in battalion ways, the Eternity Warden is pretty good. For the Eternity, is it the Eternity Guard? Can't remember actually because I'm not a Saurus player, so you kind of put me on the spot a wee bit. But yeah, no, they're viable if you're going to go down the Saurus route, which thematically it's what I used to play back in the old world, where you'd have big blocks and skinks kind of screening them, shooting them, running away, and they're your big blocks that are still pretty difficult to chew through, providing there's not too many mortal wounds thrown around. But yeah, no, I think some of the characters are better than others for sure. But the Eternity Warden stands out more than anything, and I wouldn't know with the Carnosaurs. I haven't really had much in the way of using them, to be honest.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, from what I've seen from a competitive point of view, and you guys might see this as well, is that you're right. In Warhammer Fantasy, it was very much about the Saurus and the Kroxigors really owned the tabletop. Now we've kind of seen the flip where we're seeing Skinks and more of the Behemoth style models on the table. And I'm sure with the new book we may see the tides reverse and you may see the return of the Saurus. But what I'm hearing right now is probably not as strong competitively. Again, if you find a synergy or you're taking a battalion that requires you, absolutely. But from an optimal build point of view, our Saurus heroes, to the exception of the Astrolith Bearer, isn't the most viable competitive choice.
There has been occasions where I've summoned in an Eternity Warden just because my Slan looks like it's going to be under threat. And one of the things that he can do is on a 2+ pass wounds off from the Slan to himself. So he just becomes a bit of a wound battery for the Slan. But I can't ever see a situation right at the moment anyway where I'd start with him on the table. I might bring him in, but yeah, I can't. They're just not good enough in the lists that I want to build, and they just don't do what I need them to do. But I'll have one in the toolbox.
Yep, fair call. The last thing I want people to do is walk into their local hobby store, pick up a whole bunch of Eternity Wardens thinking they're the best thing since sliced bread and get a horrible shock. And I can see in the chat here, we've got some former Seraphon players or current Seraphon players who are struggling at times. So, I think getting the list right and optimizing is certainly going to put you in good stead to handle some of the stronger armies that are out there currently.
My other big unit that I have a particular affection for is Razordons and Salamanders.
We're going to pause here. Because we're not up to there yet. We're at Heroes.
Oh, sorry.
Heroes.
Sorry.
Trying to ruin Christmas.
I am sorry. Well, we'll talk about him in a minute.
We got one more hero to talk about before we jump out, and that is the Lord Kroak himself. Do either of you have experience running Lord Kroak, and would you take Lord Kroak over our Slan? Ben looks like he has an opinion.
I have. I've been running a list. I was having a go because we have a tournament next weekend, 2,000 points Team Wars for New Zealand. So should be good to meet the guys because I missed out last year seeing them at Masters in Wellington, so it'll be good to meet some of the guys on the North Island. But I was originally running a Slan and Kroak build, which when he did what he was meant to do, absolutely phenomenal. But when he failed miserably, just didn't see the use. 430 points is just a big point dump for something that doesn't work all the time. Like, he used to get rerolls to stuff, so he used to be pretty good, but they took that away, so he would actually just take summoning points instead, which seems to be the route they're going nowadays, which is fair enough. But yeah, if he goes off against demons, pretty good. Not as good as he used to be, but 430 points. It's whether if you take him on his own. I mean, he's got 4 spells, which is very good. And if you team him up with different things, you can get him to 6 spells, which is brilliant. But to not use them seems a waste, because that's the only problem I have with the Slan. You don't use your spells. You get summoning points, but you don't have any attack magic, really. So using Kroak to just use all these spells and dump it in and see what happens, sometimes it pays off, but a lot of the time, more often than not, kind of fizzles away, really, for me. Yeah,
because you used to have that tactic called the Kroaknado, which I think is still around, but not nearly as good.
Yeah, not as used. Yeah,
throw him up on a Balewind, drop a whole bunch of mortal wounds, because the old Balewind Vortex would double the range of the spell, where right now it's only +6, which means that that Kroak NATO or that Kroak bomb isn't nearly as strong. And I'm seeing in the chat here, people are saying that, you know, the Slan and the Kroak can be a good combination, but as someone else has pointed out, it is a very heavy points investment. If you're putting in 430 for Lord Kroak, and then the Slan is what, another, was it 260? 260. So you're what's that? Maths is failing me, about 700 points essentially. That's more than 1/3 of your army going into 2 characters. So if you've got an awesome tactic and you think of a really cool way to get a lot of value out of them, do it. But it's a big points investment.
Yeah,
that's Nagash. That's almost Nagash, Alariel. That's their level.
Yeah. I just can't see a world in which I'll put Kroak on the table again. I did the same thing, tried the Kroak Slan build, and exactly as Ben said, when it goes off and it works, it's very nice days. But when he fails a couple of spells, and like I say, the lack of inherent pluses to cast on the Slan, which doesn't fit with the fluff and doesn't fit with what you're trying to do with them if you're not sacrificing spells for summoning points. The lack of that inherent ability to add to casting means that, you know, as he's got his spell that goes up in value every time you cast it, and you can cast it 3 times. If you get it off all 3 times, great. You're having a good time. If you don't, then you've spent 430 points on a model that did nothing. And that's what my issue with Kroak is. And, you know, he's got his ability to not die. So at the end of the turn, you take a battle shock test for him, and your battle shock value, I guess, if you like, is the amount of wounds that he's taken for that turn. So he does have the ability to live through damage which would otherwise kill him. But when they get to 10 wounds, that's it. You know, so you do 10 wounds to him in a turn, and he's not super resilient. He's just he's a good caster. You know, value in terms of armor, he can be rendered. You know, so 10 wounds to him, and he's guaranteed to die. For 430 points for a 10 wound model, and you can't cheese it with things like when I first picked him up and first looked at him, I'm like, oh, command point, I can pass his battle shock test, but it doesn't work, unfortunately. So he's dying when he gets to 10 wounds. So,
but hey, those 10 wounds could be going somewhere else. But it's 400 odd points. It is a big investment. He is awesome at dealing mortal wounds, and he can take a lot of damage. But on his own, that's 1/5 of your army. With a combination, we're now 1/4, 1/3 of your army. So do keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Cool. Closed out the heroes. I'm hearing things like our Slan, our Ashlith Bearer are definite go-tos. Some things like the Skink Priest is good. And obviously some of our choices may be dictated by battalions, which we'll talk about later.
Yep.
Cool. Next thing we'll talk about is our battle line choices. Now, you guys have 3 cool battle line choices to choose from, and then we'll eventually get to what Tyson wants to talk about, which is the Razordons, which are our non-battle line. So you got 4 choices. This could be easy. We talk about skinks all the time. You've got your Saurus Guard, you've got your Saurus Knights, you've got your Saurus Warriors, and you've got your Skinks. Now, let's get the elephant out of the room. Talk to me, Ben, and then Tyson, why Skinks are amazing, and how do you take them? Do you take them as small minimum units? Do you take them as big blocks? Do you take a combination? How do you load them out? Ben, kick us off. Why are these the best thing since sliced bread?
Yeah, no, I tend to go for 2,000 points. Normally, you're needing 3 straight off the bat, but it's always good to have at least 1 unit to 20. You can go further up, but with the points increase, I've found it kind of by the end of the list building, you're not going to be able to include a lot of the other big things that you might want to take. So, and I've never really worried too much about first turn, but it's nice to have just that extra layer of skinks to kind of, throw about and give you a bit more of a buffer zone. But they're they're amazing. Even for 70 points, they're still brilliant. I just wish they hadn't got rid of the large unit deduction of points that you used to get. You used to get them for a lot cheaper, but I think it's fair to say, because everyone was taking them for the points. But yeah, ignoring -1 rend, their movement 8. I normally kit them out with the shield and blowpipe just for that extra range. You're going to suffer on the hit there rather than your javelins, but it's good to just be able to get multiple shots in before you kind of charged in, which sometimes can make the difference of just softening a target up. But yeah, all in all, they're just bread and butter. They're the thing, especially with teleporting them in, objectives cappers. They're just amazing. Just running away, brilliant.
Tyson, anything you would add to that?
They do everything. I'm exactly the same. Blowpipes and shields are the way to go. Shields ignore Rend 1. Blowpipes are an 18-inch shooting attack, which from your battle line, I'm happy with that. The ability to dance out of combat is just like we said before. They could go up to 80 points, and I would still run them. I would still first pick them as my battle line choice, no matter how much other stuff in the book is cheaper. I think I personally run them in minimum blocks. And the main reason for that is I get summoning off the Engines of the Gods, and that summons in a block of 20. So if I can hit summoning off them, or I can summon in multiple small units using conjuration points and then just move them where I want them to be with Lords of Space and Time. And as Ben said, now that you don't get that reduction for taking more, I don't think there's any incentive, and I don't think that there's any real reason that I'd want to increase them to blocks of 20 or even bigger than that. Bravery 10, like all celestial demons, so they're resilient, and they survive through a lot more stuff than they really should.
And their movement is crazy good. So
movement 8.
Their movement 8, and the larger the unit, from my opinion, the larger the unit, the easier it is to get into combat. And I think you want to go as small as you can, so you can maneuver around, you can steal objectives, challenge objectives, pin opponents in. So using that movement to pin in maybe either side and really force your opponent to make tough decisions.
And I think that's where I utilize the Skinks more than anything. Is I put my opponents to a choice. And that's what Skinks do better than any other unit in the Seraphon arsenal, is they make the opponent make tough choices. Do I attack and kill this 70-point battle line unit that's going to cap an objective and potentially cost me the game? Or do I go after something bigger, nastier, and scarier that might kill me in return? Because the Skinks are never going to kill anything in combat.
I've been in combat situations where I've been fighting, let's say, 10 or 20 Skinks, but also a Carnosaur at the same time. And the choice is, do I attack the Carnosaur, and then the Skink's going to run away and potentially run around me and maybe go for my juicier heroes? Or do I attack the Skinks and now not attack the Carnosaur, and the weapons, I don't degrade the profile, and that Carnosaur just rips me a new one? They're some of the real tough challenges, and I think it's either win-win. So I'm hearing blowpipes are good. I'm hearing multiple small units. I've seen a lot of people ally in Skinks. I know Stormcast, they're quite popular ally choice because they don't have that movement. They don't have that roadblock kind of small unit. They can kind of protect their more elite units. So they're definitely overall. And the good news is I've got personal stocks in Games Workshop Skinks, so everyone should go buy them. They're that good.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Cool. What do we think of our other three? So we've got the Saurus Guard, our Saurus Knights, and our Warriors. Do either of you have experience with them? I can see some people are quite think this is the Saurus Knights are a good option. I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, it's one of the taxes for the Mega Battalion. For one of the bigger ones, you pay 80 points for. You take Fire Lance, and it can be good. I've played with it. It's very reliant on heroes as most battalions are, but I've just never really, I've had a go with it. I've never really had much of a success. I think it's very easy to kind of whittle down quite quickly, especially at smaller points. I've seen people use them without a slan, or they don't really use too much, and it's a skink star priest kind of buffing them up. And it's just never been a thing. But in order to take 3 small units of them to get one of the bigger battalions that makes your army a 1-drop, yeah, go for it. I mean, it's kind of an auto include for any of them bigger ones if you're going on a competitive standpoint and want to outdrop your opponent with a 1-drop list. You're going to need to take it regardless. But and they have their place. Their movement's pretty good. The mortal wound output can be pretty good. But yeah, just not much experience in using them, to be honest.
I think from my experience, and I'll pass it over to Tyson in a second, I think from my experience, and you guys kind of shared it, is that if you're going to go down the Saurus route, it definitely has to be within a battalion, something like the Sunclaw, for example. So thinking that a little bit further ahead is critical, because I played against Saurus and they're tough. If you've got to mortal wound them off the table, they ignore Ren 1 and Ren 2, or is it just Ren 1?
Ren 2.
Ren 1.
Yeah.
Oh, is it Ren 2?
Yeah, it's Ren 2 on the Saurus Knights.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So some of them are really tough to kind of shift, but you've got to go all in with a battalion as well.
So my issue is their movement. Their 7-inch movement for cavalry, which is just not good enough. Mortal wounds on a 6 is nice. 2 wounds is okay. But you're ignoring Ren 2, but you only have a 5-up save. So, for my 2 cents, and we've got a couple of blokes in Measured who are going to kill me for saying this. I just do not rate them. I just do not think that there's no world that I can possibly think of where I'm going to take them over Skinks.
This is the Saurus Knights, you're saying?
This is the Saurus Knights, yeah.
Specifically the Saurus Knights, yeah.
Yeah, specifically the Saurus Knights. I just don't think that in terms of cavalry, they just, you'd need to double their movement for me to really, if they were having a 14-inch movement, a la, your Fangmora Eels, your Slanesh cavalry has like a 10-inch movement or a 12-inch movement. If they were at that sort of what you expect from a cavalry type movement scenario, then I could definitely see where they'd have a place, because it makes them blisteringly quick. And they can get to where you want them to be, and they've got a little bit of punch, not too much. They're a little bit defensive with the ignoring Ren 2, but that movement of 7, the Skinks move faster, and that, to me is just, it doesn't make a lot of sense anyway. I just can't see a world in which I'd be taking them over Skinks.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, they are a good support with the Carnosaur, but you might need to be thinking about things like, the cogs and the spell, maybe the bridge, maybe our Uber driver boatman to ferry them up the board to mitigate that smaller movement. But we'll talk about that customization later. But what you're saying, Tyson, is on paper, Saurus Knights are okay, but their movement is a hindrance compared to something like a Skink.
Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of where I'm at with them, unfortunately, is they do everything okay, but I think Skinks just do it better.
Yeah, and I think they're in need of a bit of TLC on their sculpts as well, with the the mounts. They're very derpy looking. So
they're not pretty. They're not pretty models, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah, definitely a legacy from the old world. Do you like the Guard or the Warriors at all?
I like the Guard. I think they could be better. I still don't understand why they have 1 wound and not 2, as if they're the bodyguard to the Slan. That's their fluff. That's what it's going to be. They should definitely be a lot more resilient than they are. And they're resilient, but I still think there's wiggle room to make them a lot better if you're going to be paying the points for them.
I think Ben's hit the nail on the head. The fact that they're a single wound, the fluff has them as these bodyguard lizards that are supposed to be, protecting the Slan and jumping in front and saving him from damage and all that sort of stuff. I just don't think that they do it. They don't get the They get a small discount for a big unit. I'm pretty confident, but ultimately, you know, they're small units. They come in a max of 20. You know, I want them to be good because I think that they have a lot of good things going for them. But if I had to choose between them and Warriors, I'm probably taking Warriors.
Yeah. Fair choice. So I think what we're hearing is that Skinks are definitely the clear winner. We've got some benefits within the other sides, but we need to be thinking a bit more strategically and a bit more how we're going to get the most out of this investment because Skinks pay for themselves without any benefits to their 70 points, while the others have some considerations that you need to start thinking about moving forward.
And I think what we said before is if you're going down the Saurus road, then you really need to be looking at your battalion choices because that's where the Saurus are going to get their power from.
Which we're going to talk about very soon.
Yeah.
But I want now. I'm going to hand over the ball to Tyson, who wants to talk about Ripperdactyls. No, he doesn't. He wants to talk about Razordons and Salamanders. So
I can absolutely talk about Ripperdactyls because I think that they're a very good unit. But
I'll pass that one on to Ben. I'll get Ben to talk about our Sky Fiends. But I know you want to talk about your little artillery pieces.
So they're incredible. They're so good.
Which one? Which one are we talking about?
Pick
both?
Either. I love. So Razordons are always in my starting list. And I think I've got 4 Salamanders that usually get summoned in at some point during the game. Pardon me. So the Razordons are, as Coach said, an artillery piece, 2d6 shots per model, at 12-inch range. At 9-inch ranges or less, they get a rend on their attack. But they also have on a 4+, they overwatch anything that finishes a charge move within 3 inches of them. A 4+ to shoot at your full profile in your opponent's combat phase, in your opponent's charge phase, is huge. That's a 50% chance to throw out. I usually will always take them in max units. The opportunity to throw out sort of 66 attacks in your opponent's charge phase, you can't go wrong. I just think that they're that good. They got a small points increase in GHB 2019, which, going from 40 to 50 points, it's a big increase, but I think it's entirely fair. And I think that, even at 50 points, the other thing that they got in GHB 2019, which sort of went a bit undocumented, is they reduced the maximum unit size from 4 to 3.
Yeah.
That wasn't something that a lot of people talked about, and it wasn't something that sort of popped up on a lot of the things. I think that's probably the bigger change than the 10-point increase, is the fact that you can now only take them in units of 3, because I want to take them in a unit of 4. But yeah, Razordons I just think are amazing. They're absolutely fantastic. Salamanders, same deal. Salamanders are your punch piece, and when you pair them with a skink handler, so one of the things that I really do like to do is summon on a salamander and then pick it up, move it with Lords of Space and Time, move some skink handlers with it. It increases their range to 12 inches. So you're hitting something with a -2 rend D6 damage attack that then they burn at the end of the movement phase for another D3. So you're putting out, D6 plus D3 mortal wounds into a unit for six Celestial Conjuration points. I just think that's great value. And they hit on 3s and 3s. So, it's really, really, I think that's really, really good value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry,
Ben?
strongly agree. Razordons are one of my favorite units, and it's like an auto include with a lot of lists because you have that option to castle. I mean, if you don't, you're not going to get turn 1, and if they give it to you, amazing, thank you. But if you don't, you've got that chance. 4+ Overwatch, and the amount of players it's kind of took off guard is amazing. I think definitely in our community, they're starting to learn a bit more, and kind of positioning's key to kind of stay out that 3-inch, so there is a way around it. But yeah, and Salamanders, they're normally kind of left out a bit more to Razordons. Everyone seems to favor Razordons for the amount of attacks they can churn out on average. Normally kind of succeeds or is a bit better than the Salamanders. But as you said, -2 rend on something that's got a high save, it normally does the job on some big guys. So it's good to have that option. That 12-inch is amazing. The 12-inch Fire Breath, really good. So.
Before I get Ben to talk a bit about our Sky Pirates, our Ripperdactyls and our what's it called, the other one, the
Terra-don riders.
The Terra-dons, the one that's like no one's ever built a Terra-don since Warhammer Fantasy. But I want to call you out on a particular comment you made, and you said that the Razordons are always in your list, but then the Salamanders you summon. Just quickly, why? What's your thinking pattern there? Like, why do you do that and not the other way?
So when you summon in minimum units, and I just think the Salamanders is a unit of 1 work a lot better than a Razordon in a unit of 1. So a Razordon in a unit of 3 on a 4+, particularly with the Overwatch, you want that volume of shots. You want to be churning out that 6d6 shots when somebody charges you, or you want to be churning out those large volumes, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at high volume, low quality attacks. Whereas with the Salamanders, I find that the high quality of the attack makes up for the small unit size. So that's sort of what my thinking process is there.
No, fair comment. Just because a new player is not going to understand why you make that choice. So thanks for calling that out.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It's not a problem.
All right, Ben, take us home with our our Terra-don riders and our Ripperdactyls. And my gosh, do I get PSD when I hear the word Ripperdactyls?
Yeah, a lot of people do. I don't tend to take, because my personal opinion, they're brilliant. They're brilliant for what they do, but I don't take them. I don't take Shadow Strike. I've just genuinely detest it because I've played against it. But it's just one of those lists that it is amazing. With the battalion, they can be like away 3 inches, just drop down, which is terrifying for most people, especially if it's a large unit. But I feel they're very glass cannony. Yeah, you're going to run in and do something, but they're dead soon after. And I think the only time I will take them is if my engine turn 1 decides, oh, we're going to summon something. That's when I'll bring them on the board, because then I can put my Toad down, which is giving them 3 attacks of the beaks. And if they do get into combat after teleporting them 9 inches away and they charge and they get in and you attack with them, they're going to be re-rolling all failed hits and all failed wounds if you say they're swooping. And they have their time. I think with -1 rend, they'd be absolutely broken. But that's their downside, is no rend. Ignore him 1, but -1, but 5-up save. There's just so many things that if they don't wipe out the unit they attack, they're pretty much sitting ducks and they die very quickly. So I much prefer the Terra-dons kind of fly over, drop stuff, and run away kind of technique than the Ripperdactyls. Not to say that they have their place. They can be brilliant just to take out a character, especially in Shadow Strike. 3 inches away, they think they're all safe and castled. Yeah, a key character's gone that stops them dispelling, stops them casting magic, which is their linchpin to the army. They're good, but my personal experience, I just don't tend to use them. I think there's things that can counter them pretty easy. So
you raise a really good point there. I think Tyson's going to say something in a second, but because this is an old book, there's a lot of old wording. And one of those old wordings that always gets me is that, so just to take Ben a step back, there is a battalion that you can put your Ripperdactyls into that allows them to be not deployed on the table, but actually in the sky, and allows you to drop down from the sky and rip people a new butthole when those Ripperdactyls come down. And 99.999% of units in Age of Sigmar now has a rule that you must be outside of 9 inches. When you deploy, you move, you use the boatman to ferry your dudes around. Gloomspite gets Hand of Gork, they move things around. But this is one of the only few examples where that 9-inch distance does not apply. So instead of rolling, less than 25% chance to hit the charge, you guys can drop within outside of 3.
Yeah, outside of 3. Yeah.
So you deploy your Ripperdactyls 3, and then it makes it from an opponent for screening. It's very, very, very difficult to screen a 3-inch space as opposed to a 9. And then Ripperdactyls just do a whole bunch of damage, and that's often as well based on a little token called the Bloat Toad, where if it's within a certain radius or you're attacking a unit near the Bloat Toad, you get extra benefits.
Within 1 inch, I think. If it's within 1 inch when you attack. Yeah. But I think it's one of the best models in the Seraphon army, to be honest, the little toad. A lot of people have commented on him and asked. They always ask if they can attack him, which,
yeah, it's always no.
It can't be targeted.
And it's annoying. It's there, but you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. But, so any successful hits now generate D3 extra hits. So before, it used to be a lot more broken that every successful hit, you got a dice back and you rolled until you failed, basically. So you could just churn out attacks, and that's why they used to be a bit more terrifying. They still very much do the job, depending on the circumstance. But and for the points, they're cheap. They are cheap for what they do. They're a hunter-seeker missile. They're just out there, kill what they want, and that's why I've always more tempted to take it from the engines, because if it dies, hey, I got it for free. I don't really have an issue with that, and I get a block toad. So, yeah.
My only warning is if you go down this route, expect at some point in time, it could be the next General's Handbook update, it could be a new book. I don't know when, I don't know if, but I would imagine that will be one of the first rules that gets changed, which will be that deployment space. So just be aware and don't go too deep on that strategy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, so the 3-inch thing comes from the Shadow Strike Battalion, which you're paying 140 odd points for.
180. Yeah,
180 points. Yeah. So you're paying that's not a cheap battalion. Like that's to get that 3-inch deep strike, you are paying for it. I can certainly see what Coach is saying, and I do agree. I think it's going to change because 3 inches is just rude on a unit that can fly.
Well, there's no other rule like that in the game anymore. That used to be, Warrior Brotherhood. There was a whole bunch of stuff in 2016 and 17 that was normal. That's not normal anymore. So I'm just making a pre-warning, but please go on.
Yeah. So even at a 9-inch, I think it's still, I would still consider it. But I do agree with Ben. If I'm playing the Shadow Strike, I usually go double Shadow Strike with 2 units of 6 Ripperdactyls in the sky. So I get 2 toads and can put them within 2 inches of an enemy. And, if you're looking at high volume, low impact damage with a Ripperdactyl because they have no rend. So you're going to get a tremendous amount of attacks that'll be all re-rolling because they've got a built-in re-roll hits and wounds. Which is very nice. But no rend means you're just getting high volume attacks. So if you're putting them into Staunch Cast with a 3+ save, you're not killing them. But if you're putting them into a 5+, battle line unit, but then you've got to make the choices to whether you invest that heavily in a unit that's only going to kill battle line or kill, high armor save targets. So like Ben said, I will summon them in first turn off an engine if I get the option. But generally, I actually go for Terra-don Riders. I like the fact that they have a ranged attack. And I like the fact that, they can do some mortal wounds. With a 14-inch move, they're going to fly over something at some point. So I will actually tend to go for the Terra-don Riders if we're looking at past turn 1. Because you won't get the toad if you summon them in after turn 1. I'll actually, I quite rate the Terra-don Riders. You still get the reroll hits and wounds, and you still get the relatively high volume of attacks, but you also have that option to do some mortal wounds, at some point maybe, if you can get it off. And the fact that they've got a ranged attack on the spears, I quite like as well.
No, good call. And I am noticing Seraphon players are starting to move towards their away from the Ripperdactyls and going more towards the Pterodon riders. So that could be a change that's kind of swinging coming along. The last couple of units that I'm looking at that we haven't talked about is going to be the Chameleon Skinks. You've got the Kroxigors, and that's it. We've talked about it. Oh, and obviously the Skink Handlers, which you kind of touched on, that we're taking them to kind of buff up our Salamanders and our Razordons. But even as a 40 point model, it could be used even if you don't have those artillery. Could be a nice little like objective stealer and kind of annoying. What do we think of Chameleon Skinks and Kroxigors? Things that I haven't seen on the table very often. I've seen Kroxigors once in AOS. Ben.
Yeah, they're not so. They are used and they have their merits. I'd love to take them. I just, as a skink guy through and through from the old days, having them in the back line of your skinks, they kind of seem to still synergize like that to a certain degree. With their reach alone, you can kind of still do that. But it's just points, and yeah, you can get so many other different things that have that range to kind of shoot things before they're in combat with you. But Chameleon Skinks are amazing. They're really good objectives capturers, and if they're in terrain, 3+ save will frustrate the hell out of a lot of people. But they're good. Just another anti-demon, chaos demon kind of unit that you can get 3 damage off on a 6 to hit. So they can be really good in big units because they're getting 2 shots apiece.
They're
basically just a superior skink. So
can they appear in combat?
No, they have to still remain 9 inches out.
Okay.
So it's just their way that, and each hero phase you can kind of make them disappear and they can come back in your, I think it's movement phase, sorry, they can appear. So they appear anywhere on the board, so they're pretty good, especially in Shadow Strike. They're a nice alternative to take.
Yeah. And finally, our Kroxigors, I've literally played them once, and what I remember was that they get benefits if you charge them. If the Kroxigors charge, then they're not as good. But if you charge them, I remember they were a pain in the ass.
Yeah, they're interesting. They're a unit that I don't actually own any of because I've never sort of gone out of my way to get into them. But the re-rolling wounds of 1, if they're near skinks, I quite like that because they're in any army that I play, they're always going to be near skinks. And I mean, they're not terrible. They've got a little bit of rend, 2 damage weapons. On paper they should be good. 4 wounds apiece, 150 points for 3. On paper they should be good. But I don't know. I just think for me, there's better options. And in the units that I would want to play them in and where I want to be playing them, I think I'm just going to play other stuff. But that's a me thing.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've almost never seen them. And normally when I see them, they're a legacy from Warhammer Fantasy as opposed to a tactical choice. Or they love the cool models. That's our units done, which is a lot. You've got something like 14 characters, another like 10 or 12 unit choices. So we have certainly got through the fat of the unit, of the army. We've got behemoths, we've got battalions, we've kind of talked about artillery already. So let's talk behemoths. You've got 4 key choices. One I can't wait to hear your opinions about because I certainly have a strong one. That is the Bastiladon, the Stegodon, the Troglodon, and the Forge World exclusive, which is the Dread Saurian. So I don't know if you boys have any particular choices that you like or have somewhere you want to start with. Let's start with the let's start with the Stegodon. I like the Stegodon. It's a great model. Probably not the best choice on the table, but certainly love a Triceratops.
Yeah. And that -3 rend can throw people off guard quite a lot, actually.
It's a very combat model, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a variant from the Engine of the Gods. It's basically the more, I'm in your face, and you can kit it out with 2 different shooting attacks as well. So you can get the Flamer, which is pretty good against hordes. It's amazing how many attacks you can basically get from that. Or you can take the giant bow, which for D3 damage is pretty good. But yeah, they're just machines in combat. They're just they're wrecking face. So
I like Stegodons. I think that they're a viable choice. I with the points increase to the engines of the gods, I can definitely see a world where I would try them in a list and try them in my current list. As Ben mentioned, the -3 rend on the crossbow is just lovely. And I think it's got something like a 30-inch range or 25-inch range. So we're talking about, that's long range for us. I do like the Stegodon, and the fact that it's no slouch in close combat. So if it charges or if you get too close to it, it can do some damage. Like they're no slouches in close combat. They're not just an artillery piece that sits in the back and then gets completely run over when you get into combat with them.
I was going to pull up a quick rules clarity that I also just checked while we were chatting. And the rules clarity rerolled one, Jack from Reroll Once mentioned, was that these Chameleon Skinks actually can be put into combat. So you set them up anywhere on the board on the battlefield. So it doesn't actually have any restrictions. So that's an interesting, again, another old rule that looking at the current wording, there is no restrictions to say they couldn't pop up into combat, which was a very Stormcast thing you could do back in the day. Used to drive me insane. Blocks of 30 liberators that were staunch defended up. They just appeared into combat and you couldn't move them. But good pickup.
So they haven't been FAQ'd. That's all I assumed, because everything seems to have to be without 9. But it'd be pretty risky putting them in there unless you needed the bodies on like a last turn kind of ditch effort to get points. I couldn't see them in combat. Yeah,
a little wizard, an artillery piece, but I'm certainly not charging an evocator with a bunch of Chameleon Skinks.
I can't see a world where we want to do that.
What about something like a Troglodon? Tyson,
I get a lot of flack from the boys in Measured about my. I think a Troglodon is okay. I don't think. They are the absolutely terrible unit that everyone else seems to think they are. I like the fact that they've got a halfway decent shooting attack. I like the fact that they can do a little bit of bravery shenanigans. I actually don't mind them as a unit. But that's not a very popular opinion, so I tend to keep it to myself a little bit. But there was definitely a world where in my Thunderquake I was very much considering having a Troglodon as the central piece that the battalion's based around, because I just like some of the things that they can do, and in certain situations they can be good, they can be okay.
All right, so definitely not the strongest thing in the toolkit. Some of your crew think it's a bit of hot garbage, as
Yep.
But you think there's a bit of tech in there.
Yeah, look, I think there is definitely. I definitely think that having a skink on the back that can unbind a spell, having a decent movement to them, they've got a little bit of a bravery thing around them. They've got a degrading profile. They're on a 4-up save. They have 12 wounds. I just don't think they're as bad as a lot of people try and lead me to believe. I think there is definitely a place in the arsenal for them.
I mean, for 140 points for a behemoth, that's not bad. No,
I don't think so. No rend on their attacks, which is the only thing that I'd like to see. But all of their attacks are multi-damage, so they have no 1 wound, no 1 damage attacks. Everything's 2 damage, including their shooting attack. And if their shooting attack hits, you can add 3 to charge. So I just if you put them into something that's a little bit softer, I can definitely see them doing some damage.
Fair enough. Bastiladons, Ben.
Oh, my favorite. I love Bastiladons. Yeah, no, Bastildon's 280 points. Ignore all rend, which is absolutely phenomenal. 8 wounds, 4 up against mortal wounds, which just makes them so tanky. Run it in Thunderquake with an Astrolith nearby. Like, yeah, you're just re-rolling all fail hits, wounds, and saves. They're just their staying power is ridiculous. And against demons, doing 3 damage for each shot that goes through, 2d6 shots. Yeah, it could be pretty unfair, especially against demons. Yeah, the bigger demons.
And with the amount of chaos that's currently in the meta, that is a very strong chance. You take it to a tournament, there's probably a really good chance you'll be at least against one demon opponent at minimum.
Yeah. No, I'm not taking them to this tournament, which I'm kind of begrudging. I know Cameron is; he's got 2 of them. But yeah, no, they are against demons. They're a must-have. But I want to touch on the snakes are still viable as well. I mean, the mortal wound output that you can run is pretty good. Yeah, they're not going to be as consistent, I don't think. It's all very situational on where they're placed to get the most out of them with the snakes, the snake halter. But
and that's because there's 2 loadouts, right? You've got the snake and you've got the crystal kind of weapon.
Yeah. So you got the snakes, and then you've got the sunbeam, the blastoise, as you call it. And yeah, it's just searing sun energy, harnessing sun energy, and yeah, just melting face. So they are very good. 280 points. I think they'll probably stay there. They have done for the last book, because they were cheaper than that originally. And yeah, but a lot of people hate to play against them. But I think ignoring all rend is just amazing, and I feel that should be a lot more prevalent in Seraphon for certain units. But we'll talk about that when we talk about the big guy.
You mentioned Cameron's taking 2 Bastildons in the list. I guess 1, was that normal for a 2K list? Like, would you recommend 2, or do you think 1's enough? And
I think they should. They're almost an auto include. It depends very much on what you're taking. I've always favored Thunderquake over a lot of things just for that reason. But it's getting harder and harder with the points increases for certain units to actually include 2 Bastildons. You can do it, but then you suffer in other places. But you don't necessarily have to take Thunderquake. They're still good in their own right, and you can drop a couple into a normal list just to bulk it out. Maybe you've not got staying power, and they're very good to just dump in front and just watch them, especially if they're re-rolling with the priest helping them out. Re-rolling saves, they're very, very viable. So
yeah, heaven forbid there's an Emerald Life Swarm near it, and it's just healing it up as well. And then you're at CanCon, where we're in the realm of life, and it's healing up even more. So that is a scary, scary thought when you consider that. Someone's just asked in the comments, what do we think of arcs for the Bastildon? Do we have any thoughts on the arcs?
I've had a look at the lists. I think they're good. I think they could be better, but I think it's all position. It's all about position, how many you are, because I think the rules on it, off the top of my head, are you number the units. So you roll the dice. You roll 8 dice, I think it is. It might be more. I haven't got my battle time in front of me. And you number the units that are within range, and for each number that you hit, that's a mortal wound to that unit. So I think the more units that are around you, they could be very good. And I'd love to see someone run 4 of them and run forward. That could be a lot of mortal wounds, especially with some endless spells to kind of back that up. And the Seraphon spells against hordes, it would be pretty good, I think.
I'm being told there's 12 dice.
It's 12 dice.
Brilliant.
Yeah. My issue with them is the 8-inch range. If the range was 9 inches and you could teleport them to where you needed them to be, and then they did their things straight away, particularly with the changes to the teleport in GHB 2019, where you don't have that option to roll a 5 or a 6 to get that movement to get into range, I can't justify using them. You need to be able to put them where you need them to be and do their thing but putting them where you need them to be and then having to wait a turn for them to be able to do their thing is what really turns me off them. That 8-inch range is just killer for me. And yeah, I think that there's a huge amount. If you've got 6 units, that's fine, and you'll get maximum benefit from having 6 units near them. But if you can't get 6 units near them, then you're always going to have wasted dice, and you can't choose where your damage goes. It's all up to the dice roll. And I think that's where the that's where the solar beam has it over. I can point and click at the unit that I want to blow up, and I'm getting damage into that unit that I need to take damage. And 280 points is a big investment for me in a maybe. And that's what my issue with the Arc is there's no reliability built into it. Whereas with the solar engine, there's definitely reliability built in there. Sure, it's got a random number of attacks. The 2d6 has hurt me on multiple occasions, but at least I'm putting the 2 shots that I get into the unit that I want to put them into. Whereas if we were using the Arc, there's a setup time, there's a ramp time, and then you may or may not hit what you want to hit. And that's what my issue with them is. But otherwise, I think 2 Battalions will always go into every Thunderquake list that I ever build. That will always have the 2. The 24-inch range on the main gun is just lovely. Being able to teleport them around. The fact that in combat they're 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, neg 1 D3 damage means that even if you want to charge them, I'm re-rolling hits, I'm re-rolling wounds, I've got a rend on my tail, and I'm hitting you for D3 damage. Like, I just think that that's a really, really nice kit and a really nice loadout. And that's probably the thing that I find the Seraphon lack the most, is that rend on attacks. We've got high volume of attacks, and we can put out a large number of attacks, but we don't have a huge amount of rend behind it. So, armies like Stormcast are probably a bit of a hard thing for us, because they get a lot of rerolls, and particularly Staunchcast, where they've got bonuses to armor save, and same with armies like Fireslayers and that sort of thing that have huge amount of mortal wound output, which is our biggest weakness, and they can get into high. They can manipulate those armor saves. So having that rend on all of its attacks across all of its profiles, except the little skinks on the back throwing javelins, is really nice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And hopefully, we will see something in the near future when the book's updated that, very similar to like Sylvaneth, where the Kurnoth Hunters got split out, and now you've got 3 different profiles and different point allocations can be made. So who knows what's going to happen, but good discussion about the Arc as well. We now have Battalions and then Allies, and the cool thing is with Allies, you've only got one. That's the Stormcast. So I think the one that you guys are struggling with the most is the fact that we just don't have enough points to do everything. Is there any Stormcast that you would kind of tap into from an Ally perspective, or nothing that kind of screams out to you, Ben?
Yeah, no, a Knight in Cantor can, in some builds. I've used a Knight in Cantor for sure for the Everblaze Comet, which can be good. I mean, the range on it is insane. So you can just place outside of 30 and you're going to be hitting stuff. So it's always good to just get some of them mortal wounds out. Other than that, don't really tend to ally much in the way into my Seraphon lists.
Seems like it's the other way around, where a Stormcaster allying in Seraphon, not quite the other way around.
Yeah, I find that in the list that I run, by the time you put your minimum unit choices into something like a Thunderquake, you've got like 60 odd points left over. So, you're 1940 with just the minimum choices to get your Thunderquake up and running. And you're always going to put an Astrolith Bearer in. So I just can't, maybe in a Shadow Strike. And I do like the Everblaze Comet, Evocators in a Shadow Strike before the points changes. You can't sort of get them in now as easily with their points changes, which is probably a good thing. But just to have that punch, just to have that, mortal wound output and that punch, which is what we really do lack in a lot of instances, is just that really punchiness.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd probably ally in with Stormcast, is just to get some, heft behind what we're doing.
Yeah, like a small unit of evocators potentially, or maybe, I think the key that I'm seeing in Seraphon at the moment, and you guys again agree or disagree, is that the Seraphon builds at the moment are all based around heavy summoning and getting the most amount of summoning points. And any ally you pull in is just taking away from your ability to add another Astrolith Bearer, to add another ability that helps either buff that summon, or that could be a Balewind Vortex, it could be Cogs, it could be some other type of thing that would create more spells for you to conjure up more summoning. So that's the way I would see allies in this, but that's not to say that you wouldn't tap into Stormcast.
Yeah, it's situational. I mean, if you're playing friendly games, I mean, you can't always tell for tournaments. Obviously, you don't see the lists ahead of time. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but they do have their position, but there's just not much. I mean, it's 100 points for the Everblaze Comet, and it's just too expensive. It's 200-point dump 240, is it? Overall, I think that's
it's like 140 plus 100. Yeah, it's
it's an engine. I mean, which relying on the summoning facts, it's what you take the allegiance for. I mean, why would you not utilize it? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're trying to put the damage output up more on more of an assault based list, to ally an Incantor or something else that's going to do that, that's probably the go-to. Yeah.
Would you guys run a double Slann? Like, is that worthwhile taking 2 Slans if you're sacrificing things like your ally pool?
I'll let Ty go on this.
I tried the double Slann list just to have access to that additional caster to do things. I would probably be keen to revisit it now that we have a spell lore, and the ability to swap and change those spells out is not restricted to the general only. So the summoning points and the ability to generate conjuration points only comes from your general. So if you put a second Slann in, it doesn't help your summoning pool in any way, shape, or form, but it does give you access to a 3 cast model, and that can unbind anywhere on the table. And there are benefits to it, and it was one of the reasons why you used to be able. You used to try. Well, I tried the Kroak Slann list, but having access now to that spell lore from GHB 2019, it might be something that's worth revisiting. You couldn't do it in a Thunderquake list, but you could potentially do it in a Shadow Strike or another style of list, because there's just not enough points left over in a Thunderquake to do it.
Yeah, and I'm looking at some of your battalion, which is a perfect segue, and you do have some expensive battalions. The only other quick call out I'd make as well is, as more and more tournaments are playing with realm spells, that might be something to consider. If you are playing in a realms, you may want to access some of those spells, and how do you do that? It's either with a Skink Priest or it's going to be with another Slann. But obviously you can't have double. You can't be sacrificing from both Slanns to get those summoning points. It's only off the general.
Yeah.
Speaking of battalions, I think we've kind of closed that section out.
I'll just answer Rob in the chat though. He probably tuned in a bit late, but we were talking about running Kroak and Slann in the list, which there is. I've seen 1 drop lists, I've seen 2 drop lists, I've seen stuff like that, but it's all dependent. It's very expensive. So yeah.
Oh, great, good point. And that was about double Slann, or having Slann and Kroak.
Yeah, Slann and Kroak, because it does the same thing. It's still a Slann at the end of the day, so he still gets to all the bonuses.
It's just a 700-point combination. So you've got, what's that, 3 for 6? You've got about 8 battalions. You've got your Dracothian Tail, you've got your Eternal Star Host, you've got your Fangs of Sotek, Firelance Star Host, Shadow Strike, Star Beast, Sunclaw, Thunderquake. Now, a lot of those names you guys have been mentioning before, some of these names I've never seen on the table. Without going into the details of every single battalion, are there a few standout winners, and why are they standouts? Or is there some that even should get a relook at. Maybe a meta change, maybe something that probably should get more love than it has. Tyson, I'll throw it over you first.
To me personally, the absolute standout is Thunderquake Starhost. I think that is easily the best battalion that we have access to. It literally does everything. And it's one of those battalions that come the AOS 2.0, the AOS 2.0 treatment that Seraphon are going to get. It will definitely be on the chopping block because it is just that good. Everything in it heals a wound each turn. So the loadout for it is an engine or a Troglodon, Bastiladons or Stegodons, Croxagors or Razordons / Salamanders. And Skink handlers. If you take the Razordon Salamander option, you have to take the Skink handlers. So all of the units that we've talked about being A1 go into this battalion. And all of the multi-wound models heal a wound at the start of the turn. So all of that effort that you put into getting through all the Bastiladon's various defenses and you've got a couple of wounds onto it, straight away get them back. If they're within 10 inches of a slan, they get D3 back. So that the healing alone is great.
And we've just talked about how tough the Stegodons and Bastiladons are to knock down. And now you're healing 1 to D3.
Yeah, you're healing 1 to D3 every turn just by existing. And that's global. So if you teleport them away and they take a wound away from the rest of your group, you still get that healing. Like you'll still get that 1 wound. You won't get the D3 because you won't be within 10 inches of the slan, but you'll still get that healing from across the board. And that's just awesome. But the main reason that you're taking it is for the ability to at the start of your charge phase to pick Swift or Savage. Swift is reroll hits and charges. Savage is reroll wounds and saves. And it's not failed. It's just wounds and saves. So again, it's that old school ruling that makes it so much better. And the fact that there is so little in AOS 2.0 that gives you rerolls to wounds is amazing. And all you have to do to get this amazing benefit is be within 8 inches of your nominated Engine of the Gods or nominated Troglodon. Mm-hmm. So if you want to make that list that pushes forward, you can take your Troglodon. It's got movement. It's got the ability to push, and you're always going to get that bonus. Or if you want to make the castle and you want to do the turtle thing, you can sit an Engine of the Gods in between 2 Bastiladons with a Razordon line in front and just scream, "Come at me, bro." And we're re-rolling all hits because of the Astrolith Bearer that we talked about being an auto-include, and we're re-rolling all wounds and saves from the battalion. It is incredible. If you like throwing dice and you like watching your opponents get really frustrated, then it's definitely the pick for me in the battalion choice.
No, I love it. And I think the only reason we probably don't see enough of it is that you've got to buy a unit of Kroxagor, which I'm sure people aren't rushing out to buy. But that's really good.
Yeah, I wouldn't run the Kroxagor because you've got a choice. You can run the Kroxagor.
Either. Oh,
yeah.
It's either. Oh,
so
okay.
you run the Kroxagor or the artillery pieces. So
that is awesome.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Cool.
And, all the points changes that happened in the GHB 2019 affected pretty much all of the stuff that's in there. But with the reduction of the Razordons from 4 to 3, that 50-point loss more than makes up for it. So you can run your 2K list, or I get to run the same 2K list with 1 Razordon less and 1 endless spell less, which is great. I'm really, really happy with that.
Awesome. Ben, what's your battalion choice?
It's a bit biased, isn't it? I think we should. Thunderquake for sure is. You start with low amount of models, fair enough, but you can make up for that later on with summoning. So, but yeah, for 120 points for the battalion, it's actually one of our cheaper ones. For what you get for it, 120 points, it's actually insane. But yeah, it is, and you have situational, so you can change it. You don't have to. You can re-roll hits. But if you've got an Astrolith, there's no point. So it's hits and charges, I think, is the other one when you nominate what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's brilliant, and it just falls in nicely. If you just want all the big dinosaurs, it's the one to go for.
All right, that was an easy choice. I want you to take another one. Like, I'm looking at that, and it's stuff that you'd probably already take. So it's a bit of a no-brainer if you got the points.
Yeah, it suits my play style, which I can be quite castle-y, but you can still attack very easily. So I'm not too worried about getting first turn, like in a competitive scene, because I feel it can take quite a lot of abuse. It's just, yeah, without Alpha Strike list, maybe a bit different, but yeah, no, it's good to take. And with Razordons, we've lost one, and they're 50 points a model. Until you take 3 at 120, there's still 40 points in my eyes. It's weird how they've done it, because you take 3 and it's suddenly 120, which counts them. You just lose a Razordon. That's basically it. Yeah.
Easy. Any others?
Well, I feel Eternal Starhost could be better than it is. Hopefully that gets around, because I think there's endless possibilities with a lot of this stuff. But yeah, until we get a book and it's not all done through FAQs and the General's Handbook, it's hard to tell. So I see there some of these battalions going a lot further than they actually do at the moment. But Shadow Strike seems to be a big include for a lot of Seraphon players that prefer the Razordons or want Terra-dons. It's very good to have that option of maneuverability. The stealthy advance after setup, you can move D6, which could be good straight away to put pressure on them front objectives straight off the bat. And yeah, so re-rolling certain things, it is good. But other than that, there's the big 80-point one, which gives you a bit more of an Alpha Strike kind of feel, where you can keep them in the heavens and drop them down. So as many units as you put on the board, you can put off the board, basically. So that puts some pressure on that. You can drop some Battalions. You could drop anything out of the sky, put pressure on your opponent quite early on, or in range to be able to launch some spells with the Aslan Purple Sun, and then basically teleport away. So it's a good option to have.
The other one that I think probably bears mentioning, because you do see it very occasionally, is Firelance. So Firelance makes your Saurus Knights borderline okay, but they just have an issue, in my opinion, keeping up with the Scar Vet, who has a much higher movement, and you're either holding the Scar Veteran back to give the bonus to movement to the Saurus Knights, which is probably just bad value. But the extra mortal wounds, so on a 6, they do an additional mortal wound in addition to the one that they get from their War Scroll, which is nice, but it's 150 points. And that's sort of what kills it for me, is that it's really expensive, and you do have to build a list around it. And if you're taking a list of lots of Saurus Knights because you want dinosaurs riding dinosaurs and that's what you want to do, then it's a really good choice. But yeah, I at 150 points, I'd rather take a Thunderquake at 120 that does more.
Easy. I think Any other battalions you want to talk about before we kind of wrap up this section? So we got a couple more. Just because they're there doesn't mean we need to talk about them.
The only one that I probably is the Fangs of Sotek, which is, I think, that the one that Ben was taught. Was it Fangs you were talking about, or Dracothian?
Dracothian, or the dragon. Yeah, Dracothian, yeah, I think was the one I was. Yeah.
Fangs of Sotek. I tried desperately to make it work, but I couldn't put all the good stuff in. But it's a 1-drop battalion, and it gives you some tactical options. But it's really, really hard to put the stuff that you want to put into it. Like, it's sort of it's a big battalion built out of other little battalions. So you can put things like a Thunderquake in it. You can put things like a Firelance and a Sunclaw and that sort of stuff into it. Which, if you're looking to build that one drop list that you want to make sure you outdrop your opponent, so you get to decide that flow, but it's really difficult to get all your buff stuff in there. So you're really difficult to get your Slan in. So I mean, it comes with a Slan, but I just found it really awkward because I couldn't put the Mastodons that I wanted to put in. You had to sort of take your Thunderquake with subpar choices just to fit them in. So it's nice for a super battalion, but it's a really difficult build around.
Yeah.
Cool. And by the way, those 2 battalions are in the General's Handbook. So you've got the Fangs of Sotek and the Dracothian Tail. They're not in they're not in the book. They're in the General's Handbook 19.
Yeah. And as I was saying before, towards the start, you're taking Saurus not because you want them, but because you want the big battalion. That's basically how it feels, and I feel. Hopefully, along the line, they give you an all Seraphon one. I would love to run a Thunderquake and Shadow Strike together. Would be amazing, and actually get a mega battalion without only taking 3 of this. Because you lose so many points and you lose out on the toys that you actually want to take. So they're good for a competitive side, but I just think the staying power with it, what you're going to take with it, getting command points and the landing down there 9 inches away is pretty good. Free teleport, just staying out in reserve. But other than that, for 80 points, good. But without taking Saurus, I just wouldn't take it.
Close that one off. We're done battalions.
Yep.
Cool. Let's get into the sexy, fun stuff that is, and hopefully by now people who are listening have got a really good understanding of how to start formulating a Seraphon army, and they're thinking about the unit choices. They've got a really good idea of the hero choices, the battalions. They're now looking at their battalions and thinking how they feed in their units and start to get the most, or at least kind of piece things together. Now that you've got a rough idea of that list, I want to start customizing it and using things of command traits and artifacts and spells that are going to help you go from good to great. So to kick things off, your command traits are sitting outside of your book, and they are sitting in the General's Handbook 2019. Now, I'm looking here, and you, whether you're a Slan, a Saurus, or a Skink, each of those have 3 choices they can choose from. Now, we'll talk Slan first, because I think in almost every situation, the Slan is going to be your general. Is there a particular command trait that you think is better than others, Tyson?
Look, I think Great Rememberer is definitely the absolute standout choice, and I think that if you started with that every time, you would not be disappointed. So Great Rememberer allows us to use Lords of Space and Time twice. So instead of having 1 pick up and move teleport, we get 2. I can definitely see that there's an argument for Vast Intellect, which is gives us access to the -1 to hit spell from the Skink Priest and the Manipulate dice rolls from the Skink Starseer. I can definitely see using that, and I have used that. I took that to CanCon last year, and that -1 to hit was really good, and it gave me something to do with the Slan, because at that time we didn't have a spell lore. It gave me something to do with the Slan that wasn't just make conjuration points, or dispel an endless spell or dispel a spell. So they're the 2 standout for me, and they're always the 2 that I'm going to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going to take a Saurus or a Skink, either of any of those come out or stand, they stand out of the 3 for, I don't know, let's say Saurus.
In all honesty, I'd actually have to look them up to see what they are, because it's never ever. There's just no list that I would possibly build that doesn't start with the Slan as the general.
So the 3 are, you can reroll hits of 1 made by the general. You can reroll saves that attack the general. And then on a 5+, you generate a command point at the start of the hero phase. So that one, the command point one, is the one that stands out for me the most.
Yeah, I think the command point one's the obvious choice out of those three. The Saurus lists, if you're going to do them, tend to be that little bit more command point heavy. So going back to what we were talking about before, if you're going to take the Skink Star Priest to get that option on a 2+ to get a command point, then on a 5+ to double down on that seems fine.
And then with the Skinks, you have either one, the general. If the general's a Skink priest, they can use Celestial Rites twice. You've got a +1 move to the general, which also gives them a +1 to save. And then in the combat phase, they can pick an enemy hero within 3, and on a 4+, it deals a mortal wound. So I think the double Celestial Rites is the one that probably stands out for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the only viable choice. You don't want your Skink anything getting into combat if you can avoid it. You don't want them within 3 inches of an enemy. So immortal wounds, meh. And if they're getting in, it's probably a bad time because even +1 to save will bring their 6 to a 5.
Ben, what about artifacts? So you've got 6 artifacts to choose from inherently in the General's Handbook, and then after that we'll go to Malign Sorcery. So is there any particular artifacts that are Seraphon only that you like?
Yeah, there seems to be. Well, there's a couple of once per battle. It depends on the build you're wanting to do. But I see a lot of people using the iridescent matrices, which is basically you can pop back up on a 3-up with D6 wounds again. But if they haven't finished all their attacks, they just end up chopping you down again. So, which is good, but you don't want to be in combat with your Slan. But it seems to be what people go for just to have that chance, which makes a 260. A 260 character actually quite viable for certain things, because he used to be able to move, I believe, but they've reworded it. He used to be able to move out of combat if he couldn't be placed there again, which was pretty good. Blade of Realities is pretty strong. Improve the rend characteristic of a weapon by 1, where we're actually lacking a bit of rend in the army. Kind of can make the difference on some of your more assaulty type of heroes. And the Prism of Aminok is pretty good. Once per battle, pick 1 enemy unit. Then 12 on a 1 suffers 1 mortal wound. 2 to 5 is D3, and on a 6 D6. So depending what kind of build you're going on, it could do some damage. They're the ones that really stand out. For me,
I really like the Light of Draconic, the light done before, which is a once per battle automatic unbind. I think that's the one that really screams to me.
Yeah, I think it's the only one we have, which is good. It's like a dispel scroll, just throwing that out there and deny the bad spells.
Yeah. Tyson, what about yourself from Malign Sorcery? Is there any ones that you're looking at, sort of judgments on the toenails of a Bastiladon or?
Absolutely, the Ethereal Amulet. Ethereal Amulet, I will generally put onto the lead beast in my Thunderquake because he's always in range of his own buff. So for me, that's the Engine of the God. So it makes him a 4+ unrendable save that he rerolls all fail. He rerolls saves. So that's a really good choice. And I think that's from Realm of Shadows, Realm of Death.
Death.
Death. Yeah.
Death.
So the other artifact from Realm of Death that I quite like is the Ragged Cloak for the Slan, to just blank a turn of shooting. And just, give him that opportunity to just live through a turn to do his thing for another turn. So they're generally the 2 that I'll take in my competitive list is, the Ethereal Amulet and the Ragged Cloak.
I'm hearing things like the Dimensional Blade on the Scarvet, or even the Sword of Judgment on a cold one can be quite good as well. Some of those damage dealing ones, maybe command point generating artifact can be helpful, depending on the type of build that you're making.
In that Saurus centric list, I definitely look at the Aether Quartz Brooch as an option, or something like Gear Strike, or something that will give you a bit more rend, so that your attacks have that punch that you want them to have. So I can definitely see that being something that I looked at.
What about endless spells? Is there any endless spells that you would access, given that you're sacrificing a spell casting often for summoning? Do you dip into the pool of endless spells, and if so, what are they?
For me, Balewind Vortex is definitely an auto include. I used to fit cogs in as well, but now that they've gone up in points, it's not as viable an option. But popping your Slan up onto a Balewind for +1 save, +1 cast just gives you more summoning. And so, yeah, I'll quite often do that. And then, yeah, same thing with the cogs. You get another caster to cast the cogs for you, and then the Slan turns them for more summoning.
Ben, what yourself?
Yeah, no, definitely Balewind. As well, the extra range can mean the difference, especially for the new Seraphon spell lore, where you can just basically, out of dispel range, just throw it across the table. Especially Stellar Tempest on a 5+. For every model in the unit for hordes, they suffer a mortal wound, which can be brutal if they can't dispel it. But amongst that, cogs, yeah, for extra movement, depending on what you want to do, or an extra spell, very good, just to have that option. 80 points, I think, now, so it did go up, but it's still viable. But Purple Sun is a big standout for 50 points. The amount of punch, if it goes off, it's a bit like Kroak, but cheap. So if you throw it out there on a big unit and try and tap as many units as possible, it's doing damage. And the way it's worded is on a 6-up, anything under 6 wounds is removed. So they could have 4 wounds and it doesn't matter. You just remove a model. So against Kernoff Hunters, against some of these like semi-elite units that are doing damage, but they're not 6 wounds, it's brutal. And anything over 6, if you roll a 6 on them, it's 2d6 mortal wounds. So for 50 points, if it does happen, it's an 8 to cast, but with a couple of things that give you +2 to casting with your Ashlift Bearer, and if you roll on your constellations at the start or pick it on a 4-up, it can help. So, but definitely very good, very good.
Does the Slan fly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was just thinking Prismatic Palisades could be a nice way to block line of sight from him, but no, that wouldn't work because he's a flyer. Life Swarm, I think, could be really cool, especially if you're going down the Bastiladon or even like a Steglodon kind of build where it's really tough to take them down and then you can just heal them up.
I think that I don't know that I'd pay 60 points for it. I think I'd rather just run a Thunderquake and for 120 points get basically the same effect with an unlimited range that I don't need to worry about it going off. It just happens. Yeah. So the other spell that I used to really, really like running was Geminids. Anything I find that in this current meta, anything with a negative to hit is really, really good. So, but Geminids went up in points. And so, unfortunately, I had to make a cut, and they got the cut. So, yeah, that's the only sad part.
And look, to be honest with you, as an opponent, I'd actually be okay. And I'm being told by the chat that the Slan doesn't fly. It's only his command ability that lets him choose if he wants to fly. Which if that's true, if that's true, and I'm conscious that there's lots of millions of rules we need to remember.
No, unless if FAQ'd it says a Slan Starmaster can fly.
Can fly. Yeah, no, he definitely flies. His command ability gives everything within 10 inches, I think it is, of him the ability to fly. But he inherently flies.
Okay, so if the choice is there, Palisades could be great because then it just blocks line of sight. If there's no choice, not a good decision. You're just going to blind yourself. Yeah. Wow, we've talked a lot, and I think we're kind of getting towards the final end of this. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about from like a customization point of view, or should you share now your hints, tips, and tricks along the way that you'd give me as a new starter, or maybe help me go 4-1 at a tournament, or even 5-0? Let's get to that then.
First.
Yeah, let's go to the sexy stuff. All right, so we've now built our list. We've got all the considerations about battalions. We've customized it with artifacts and spells and all that good stuff. How am I going to get the most out of it on the table? So what advice would you give to me, and maybe you go round robin, what advice would you give to me, Tyson, if I was starting Seraphon for the first time? How do I use this army? What's the advice you're giving me?
Know your ranges on stuff. Bastiladons are a 24-inch range. There's some really different values in there, so it's not just not everything's nice round numbers that are easy to remember. And also, some war scrolls have had the AOS 2.0 where it's now wholly within or it's just within. So knowing what your ranges are on stuff, I think is really important. And that's what I found running a Thunderquake is you've got to be 8 inches away from your lead unit. You've got to be 10 inches with your Slan, wholly within 12 of your Astrolith Bearer. Your Bastiladons have a 24-inch range. Your ranges on your Salamanders are modified. So you've really got to know what those values are. One of the best pieces of advice that I've seen is from Doug on 2+ Tough is do a list. And have you tell me when, and have all those range values written down so you're not constantly looking them up. And as you learn what they are, then you'll learn to remember them. But deployment is probably the other really big important thing, making sure that as you're deploying units, you're very conscious of where this stuff goes and what protections you've got for your buff pieces. Making sure that you weave a unit of skinks around things like your Slan and your Astrolith Bearer, so you get that -1 to hit. Is probably really, really important once you've learnt what your ranges are.
Ben?
Yeah, no, I agree. Bubble wrapping, it's all about movements, because you can be just 1 inch out and you lose all your buffs. So it's placement is key, and just play practice games. And biggest thing is don't be afraid to lose skinks, because I've seen a few Seraphon players that are afraid, they're worried about losing skinks that effectively you can summon back pretty quick. It's not the end of the world. They're expendable. They're going to shut down a lot of charges, especially for those flying units. And just space them out. Just conga line them where you need them. That's pretty much it. But they're a very viable army. I think patience is going to be key with them, because there's a lot going on at times, depending on what build you take. But with a new book coming out, hopefully we'll see a bit more. But it's a great army to learn with and have fun with, because there's loads of possibilities.
And I think the thing we touched on before is it is actually like we make it sound a little bit doom and gloom, but it is really forgiving. If you do get something wrong, or you do find that you're slightly out of a buff range, or you've slightly miscalculated something, Lords of Space and Time lets you fix those mistakes. And it gives you that little bit of flexibility to, if you were a little bit loose in deployment, to fix it going into the rest of the game. Because the other thing that took me ages to learn was when you summon off an engine, for example, it's got to be wholly within 12 of the engine, but you have to have enough space. Yeah. So when you're putting in 20 skinks, they do have a footprint, and they do, you do have to find room for them to stay in cohesion, be wholly within 12, all of that sort of stuff. So when you've got your turtle, if you're not spread out enough, then you won't get your 20 skinks in. So therefore you've just wasted your summoning. Which when you're rolling on an Engine of the Gods, if you hit that magic, the magic number for summoning, you want to be utilizing it, and you want to bring those 20 bodies in. The other thing is make sure you've got a really diverse and large summoning pool, and that's probably the thing that I found the most restrictive in only starting the army sort of 12 or 18 months ago. Was I just didn't have the models to be able to do what I want to do. I now do. And so I have a much better time of, if I want to bring in a spare engine, I've got a spare engine. If I want to bring in, 10 skinks 3 times, I've got 30 skinks to be able to bring them in. I've got spare Bastiladons. I've got the spare units that I need in my summoning pool to be able to pull in those toolboxes and get value out of them.
Yeah, so it's along the lines of basically get used to carrying numerous boxes and battle foam trays because you don't know what you're going to use. You might need your Dread Sauron at 40 points which we didn't talk about.
We didn't talk about holy shite.
I know.
Yeah,
I just wish he ignored Rend. If he ignored Rend, he would be worth the points. But he's a battle house if you can get him into combat. And yeah, Skink Star Priest giving him double damage on his bite is just horrible.
And it's terrifying. It's a big piece of resin, so learn how to transport this big beast. It is quite. It's probably one of the largest models in Age of Sigmar. It is massive, and I don't think it fits in a standard carry case. So
mine's just in a cardboard box with bubble wrap. Just like it's. I won't be taking it up there. It's too big and delicate to damage on a flight to the North Island. So
yeah, I know Chris Tott, who's a Seraphon player, is obsessed with his Dread Saurian, and part of it is a psychological damage as well. As people just like, holy shit, I've never seen anything this size.
When you're not expecting it, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like somebody bought one to Lord of War in Melbourne and got quite a few wins just by simply people not knowing what it did, and not playing around the fact that it's got a bravery bomb built into it. It has got some damage output. It does a few different things. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. He's a bit of a point dump, but he's good fun. I mean, he's a display model basically. He's your centerpiece. I mean, he makes all your skinks within 24-inch battle shock immune, which is amazing. So you could. There's no reason you can't play around with lists, and it doesn't have to. You can have a slan in by all means, but you could just run loads of skinks and just flood the board. 270 skinks and Dread Siren. Let's go.
I played Chris with 110 with the Dread Siren as well, and that was tough. It was nasty. That was super nasty. But if you want to push 110 skinks around, good on you.
Yep, you can have fun doing that.
But in saying that, I was pushing around 140 grot, so I guess this is the pot calling the kettle black. What other advice would you give me? Maybe I'm a player who's winning 2 games at a tournament or even 3 games at a tournament, and I'm hoping to get even better. I channel my inner doggo. I don't know whose doggo that is, but that's awesome. Actually, before that, I did have a question that got asked by one of our listeners, and he had asked, how do you plan or prepare for an alpha strike? What are your considerations if you're up against a Stormcast or maybe a Nighthaunt that's going to try to attack you from an alpha?
Oh, this Richard.
This was Richard.
Oh,
is that your dog,
my
Ben?
best friend and enemy. No, it's not me.
That's Ty's dog.
No, that's mine. I'm just going to let her out. Give me 2 seconds.
He's a good friend and also my arch nemesis. I played against his Order Draconis, and it's intimidating. An Alpha Strike list, unless you're positioned well and you're turtling, your Razordons come into play. If you roll a 4, they're going to at least do something. But Alpha Strike lists are pretty hard to go against. You've got you can throw your skinks out there, you can put lines in, but ultimately it's about placement of those skink walls and just hoping that they don't get a large enough charge to actually do anything. Because once they get in amongst all your heroes, it's kind of game over, especially with Draconis. I won't be missing that.
And that's probably the argument of actually taking a good group of skinks in your list as opposed to summoning. Because an Alpha Strike may want to take that to the top of turn 1 where you haven't summoned yet, and they're going to get all your squishy stuff. So if that's your meta or you're going to a tournament and you're concerned about it, certainly building in those chaff walls, whether it's lots of just small blocks of the skinks or bigger groups, having those bodies to at least stop the juicy stuff being hit will be critical.
Yeah, and just knowing having your background information on different armies, I think that's the hardest thing that people come to deal with. They know their army so well, but they don't know the key pieces of other people's armies, so they overlook it. That's so anyone getting into it, it's very much for Seraphon in a lot of armies. You need to know what things do. You're going against things. You need to know what does what, and there's a lot more to it in a competitive sense rather than just attacking blindly. And it will help Seraphon out quite a lot if you can kill them key pieces that are allowing their army to do as much damage as some armies can do.
What about some of more of the advanced tactics, Tyson? So what's going to help me go from 3 wins at a tournament to 4 or 5? Like what's some other advice you give me?
Think the way that you utilize your skinks is incredibly important, and there's so much play in what they do that really having a good understanding of the rules of the game itself, particularly around movement and combat and the way that it works, I think is probably the easiest way to go from sort of 3-2 to 4-1. And like Ben said, you've got to know what the current monsters in your meta are doing, what the big players are doing, and how you counter them. Feck was for example, we went to Lord of War, played Liam in Feck. He absolutely obliterated me because I didn't know the Feck matchup well enough, and he just flew over the top with his 3-inch reach and nommed on all of the important stuff. Did a buttload of mortal wounds, and I got absolutely destroyed because I was completely unprepared for the fact that his zombie dragon Terrorgeist thing, whatever it was, had that 3-inch reach that dealt a crap ton of mortal wounds. So had I utilized my skinks better, and had I utilized my skinks to better screen against that, then he wouldn't have been able to just nom my important pieces. And skinks you throw them away, but you throw them away with purpose. And then you bring more in. So for 6 conjuration points, you bring in 10 skinks. And I'm a big proponent of not storing up conjuration points to summon in big things. I like to summon in lots of little things. So I've got 120 skinks in my case ready to go, and if I need to summon in 120 skinks, they're there. And it's very, very rare, unless it's sort of turn 1, that I will bring in anything off the engine other than 20 skinks, because it's 20 bodies that are resilient, that move, that do everything that I need them to do, and that can, I can put them anywhere I need them to be. So that's sort of, and the other thing is know your missions. There's been a couple of times where, being a relatively new player myself, I've been caught out by not understanding the missions and not understanding how they work. And so one standout example was, what's the mission where you've got 4 objectives, and if you control each of them, it's an auto win. So I didn't realize that it was tap and go. So you can put an objective on there and then move off it. So rather than sort of summoning on to take off the ones that my opponent had moved on to, or just teleporting onto the ones that my opponent had moved off to, I was, left unprepared. So he came in, killed a few things, got some more models on the 2 that I held, and auto lost. So I think that those noob mistakes, if you can learn from them, are really, really key in getting better at playing the army and playing the game.
And ask your opponent questions. Ask them plenty of questions at deployment. This series, obviously, we do deep dives in other armies, so you can always look into that as well. Ben, you just went to mute.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm back.
No, I was just going to ask, is there any other advanced advice? Maybe even is there things in your summoning kit that you would summon more than others, or anything else I should know?
Well, you're basically wanting to get as many bodies on your objectives as possible. Keep renewing them skinks, because they're going to die. They're going to die in droves. But also just bolster up your weak sides. If something dies, don't be afraid to use some points to just put it back. It's frustrating for your opponent. You can save for the bigger things. It just depends. It's all about your list building, and how you write your list to begin with, and then it will give you an idea of what you're going to need. Oh, I'm against a demon list. I'm going to need some sort of fire support that's going to do some damage here. So Bastiladon will save for that. Depending if you're running your cogs and your Bellwind, that's an extra 2 spells that you can be using for that. Or you might think, I'll use another engine, because they're quite versatile, and you're getting all of this for free. Yes, you give it away in kill points if it's killed, but at the end of the day, it's just knowing what you're going to need for each situation, which is the most challenging bit sometimes. But you realize you need an Overwatch there, you need this there, you need something big to kind of support this line, and just go from there.
Look, we're almost at 2.5 hours, so we have taken up a lot of time and talked a lot of things, and I'm sure we could talk a lot more strategy when it comes to Seraphon. Is there any other parting words of advice or any things that you want to call out that we haven't called out yet before we start wrapping up the show? Tyson, maybe yourself first. I can see the sun is not being favorable to you right now.
It's not. Yeah, it totally is. Look, really, give them a go. I think that if you're looking for an army that has lots of built-in rerolls and and that is really, really forgiving for a new player to pick up and just have a bash at, they are super cool models. And there's super cool, hobby opportunities within the model line. But they're also quite good on the table. And they're, for me, they're a solid 4-1 list. They're not Slanesh, they're not sort of Feck, they're not at that S tier power level. But they're a very solid 4-1 list, and with the right matchups in the right way, you can definitely go 5-0 with them at events. So and if you're a new player learning AOS, I think that they're definitely a good one to start with.
Good point. And Ben, yourself?
Yeah, no, I think it's more for the love. So take whatever units you want. It's a great learning army, but take whatever you like the look of. If you want Terra-dons, and take them. It doesn't matter. People has their own preference on it. If they want Ripperdactyls, they'll take them. No, you just take what you want. It's one of those armies that's quite forgiving, and you'll learn quite quickly what works for you, what play style. So if you do enjoy Saurus, then brilliant, go for it. It might be something different that no one's tried before. So, but all in all, just don't be afraid to lose and learn, and give them a go. I mean, they're up there. They're not top tier, I wouldn't say, but depending on the general, I think for sure they can definitely win at tournaments. There's just not a lot of a margin for mistakes, really.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I was at Adepticon this year and Seraphon won it. They went 5-0.
They did. I think he was the first Seraphon player to do it, though.
Yeah, Sam from Team America, a part of Bill Sousa's crew. So 5-0, I remember. So it can be done.
They can, yeah.
So, and then obviously just proved it. It was literally, that was in April. So
I think the big difference between that list and now is the GHB points changes. He was running evocators, which at a full unit size, which was your 400 point allocation. Now they're 460 points, so you can't get them all in. And all the stuff that went into his Thunderquake went up. So, but having said that, the tactical flexibility and the spell lore, like I don't know if we've really given the spell lore that's come from the GHB 2019 probably the credit that it's due, and also the fact that you've got unlimited dispel range on your Slan for endless spells now means that you can be across the board, and before that pendulum gets to you, it's gone. Before that purple sun gets too close, it's gone. That to me is something that that endless spell interaction is something that we really, really lacked. And to get that is really good. But even the lore spells and just being able to change them on the fly, like each at the end of each hero phase to go, okay, I've nuked the horde down. Now I want something that's going to give my units fly so that they can get to where I need them to be. Let's go. I just think that there's that tactical flexibility for being able to change in and around is massive. Not to mention the fact that now your teleport is guaranteed. I think that level of interplay is really, really good.
Any spells that stand out, by the way, because we did forget to talk spells. Is there any particular spells from the Seraphon lore that stands out, whether it's the Claws of Glory, Meteoric? Yep.
I like the Meteoric, the
Convocation.
Yep. I've just Bear with me a sec.
Stellar Tempest, Mystical Unforging, Walk Between the Realms, Claw of Glory.
Certainly, Meteoric Convocation is one that I quite liked. So roll 8 dice within 24 inches, 30 inches if you're on a Balewind, and 8 dice, 5s are mortal wounds. It's fairly good for character sniping. It's fairly good to take out some of those, those buff pieces that get in there, or just soften them up a little bit. But I think the real standout for me is, which one is it? It's not Apotheosis. It's Stellar Tempest. Just being able to nuke units at 30-inch range with a 5+ is great.
That's with the Balewind.
Sorry.
24 plus 6 with the Balewind.
Even at 24, the max range on a Purple Sun, for example, which is on a 6+, you slay a unit. If you're going to put that spell after 1 wound models traditionally, it's got more cast range, it's got a lower cast value, and it goes off on a 5. So I just think it's great. I think that those 2 spells in particular really, really stand out for me. There is definitely a world where allying in a Gotrek and looking at something like Walk Between the Realms to give him some fly is something that I am toying around with. I think that Gotrek in a Seraphon list could work really well.
Ben, yourself, any other spells you'd call out?
Stellar Tempest for sure. If you have everything lined up, you have your +1 to cast from your constellations, from your Astrolith Bearer, which also increases your range by 8 inches. So you can get over that 30-inch mark, which is pretty cool. So along with everything else. But yeah, it's just good. It's pretty pricey though. I mean, cast on an 8, but if you got +2, it's more likely to happen. And each 5-up mortal wound, it's definitely good against hordes. But I also like the one with the relic, where you basically pick a hero, do the damage. Mystical Unforging, D3 mortal wounds. So it's basically an arcane bolt, but on a 5-up, you remove their artifact as well, so it can't be used for the game, which is brilliant against Doppelganger Cloak, which is the bane of every person's existence. Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like we got a whole bunch of good spells to choose from, and we have, if fair to assume, we have done a comprehensive review of the Seraphon book and the additional book, which is the General's Handbook, because half your stuff is sitting in there.
Yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to the new Battle Tome and the AOS 2.0 treatment. If I've learnt nothing on any of the other armies that I play, when they get that AOS 2.0 treatment, it really changes what you bring. Like at the moment, for me, the absolute obvious choice is a Thunderquake. I'm really hoping that in the new book, Saurus become viable, and you want to take them, and you want to, put those models on the table because they're good, not just because they look cool.
Well, I'm a Cities of Sigmar player. Been playing the Free People since day 0. Demigryphs have been hot garbage for 4 years. They've finally become the filth of the world. So I can only imagine that Croxigors are going to be the new filth if and when a new book comes. So
yeah.
I think we've done a really good comprehensive view of the book as it stands. Obviously, should we get a new book, there will be an updated version of this. So Ben, if people want to find you and they want to chat more list design or want to talk about strategy, where can they find you? Are you on the interwebs anywhere?
Yeah, no, I'm on Facebook and email. So I'll try and leave something there in the chat, I think.
Or we'll just get you on Twitter. Just join Twitter, but it'd be easier.
Too much social platform.
Are you on Instagram?
No, I stay away from all that. Just Facebook. I know, old school. Not much into the technology side of things.
Send a carrier pigeon or a raven to New Zealand, and they'll find
pretty much. Yeah.
And Tyson, you're on the socials?
I do, yeah. So I'm on the Facebook. I do have a Twitter. Don't ask me what it is. I check in with it occasionally.
I'll leave it in the comment section. I think it's like Tyson Gleeson 1.
Yeah, all of my social stuff is really creative. So it's just basically my name with a number after it, because I'm not real creative when it comes to that sort of thing. So
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that we found all the ways to continue this conversation. I'm sure there are Seraphon groups and TGA, and there are other places that you can find more information if you want to lick the bloat toad and become a real Seraphon master. But Tyson, Ben, thank you both for your time.
Nice to meet you.
I learned a lot. Hopefully meet you at CanCon when you come over and you cross the ditch and get to play on the world's biggest Australian event.
That'd be brilliant. Mm-hmm.
Should be good. Tyson, you coming?
Yeah, absolutely. CanCon's top of the list for stuff to attend right after Sydney GT.
Awesome, which is my event.
Yeah, yep. So very much looking forward to that one. It's going to be good.
And as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to all of the Patreons who have really helped and supported this channel. So lots of cool stuff happening, and without these guys, a lot of the things that I'm doing on this channel probably wouldn't be happening, or would take a little bit longer. So always appreciated. And I know Reflex Dog was in the chat. I think he just got home. So guys, Ben, Tyson, thank you very much for your time. I hope you guys who watch this either live or on replay get value out of this and help you build a new Seraphon army or go from good to great at your next event. Gentlemen, let's log off. Thank you both for your time.
Cheers,
Not a
mate.
problem. Thank you.
See you guys.